Good evening and welcome. Find a comfortable place to rest. Let your shoulders loosen, your jaw unclench, and your breath move in a slow, easy rhythm. Whenever you're ready to drift off, we will walk together through quiet corners of the past, ordinary tasks, careful hands, and steady routines. Tonight, let's quietly explore for gentle seams. First, we will step beneath a warm dome where attendants keep an Ottoman bath moving in calm circles of steam, water, and marble. Then we will follow irrigation keepers in ancient Mesopotamia, measuring the river's patience with sticks, ropes, and clay notes. After that, we will stand beside vats in Joseon, Korea, where mulberry bark becomes soft sheets of Hanji, lifted from the water with an even hand. Finally, we will ride a night train in Victorian Britain, where postal clerks sort letters in a swaying carriage while the countryside sleeps. There will be no rush and no urgency, only the soft rhythm of work done with care. If you like, close your eyes, picture lamplight on stone, hear low voices, the drip of water, the whisper of paper. These are small stories, made to slow the mind and settle the body. When you are ready, let us begin. We begin before sunrise, in the cool blue hour when the streets are empty and the air holds the night's last quiet. A single key lifts from a cord at the waist of the head attendant. It is heavy and smooth from years of use. The door slides open with a wooden sigh. Within, the bath still sleeps, pale marble, a hush of stone, the faint, clean trace of yesterday's soap. The attendants start their morning in simple clothes, linen wraps tied at the hip, and wooden sandals with small pegs under the soles. These sandals keep the feet just above water, and their hollow tap will later mark an easy pace across wet floors. For now the sound is scarce. Only the folded towels answer, soft piles and shadowed stacks. In a side chamber, a copper cauldron, the Kazan, waits over the furnace mouth. One attendant lays thin splits of wood across the grate, then thicker logs. He does not rush the flame. A slow fire brings the water to heat without startling the stone. The first smoke slips into the flue, and the bath begins to breathe. There is a path through the building, from the cool outer hall, through the warm room, and onto the hot chamber beneath the dome. Along this route the attendants move like a quiet current. They set bowls, bright metal with little handles beside each basin. They tip the basins to test the drain. A palm fiber brush makes a rasping whisper as it sweeps the floor, collecting yesterday's grit into a neat line. Under the great dome, small round lenses of glass prickle the ceiling like stars. In daylight, they scatter sun in soft circles. At dawn, they hold just enough pale light to shake the space. The central slab, the Gibektawi, the belly stone, keeps a low warmth from the previous day. A hand placed flat can feel it, not hot, only kind. The stone will wake as the water warms. A shelf of soap stands near the warm chamber. Olive oil cakes wrapped in twine, some scented with laurel, some plain. The head attendant lifts one and presses his thumb into it. The soap gives slightly, neither too hard nor too soft. A good sign. He shaves thin curls into a bowl, adds a little warm water, and stirs with his fingers. The mixture becomes silken and pale. Long ropes of lather will later slide from cloth bags onto the stone like quiet clouds. In some houses this foaming is a specialty. Attendants learn to turn a bag with a precise wrist so the bubbles lay evenly. It is a small skill, pleasant to watch, and calming to perform. In a corner, wooden clogs now and now arranged by size, their leather straps softened with oil. Towels lie in tidy ranks, coarse ones for the bench, dense ones for the body, and light cotton wraps for the head. The names vary from city to city, but the order matters everywhere. The attendants memorize the stack by feel. Eyes are not needed when wet hands must move quickly. New the furnace, the water speaks for the first time. A low knock against the copper skin. The attendant opens a side valve and lets a thin thread run. He touches it with the back of his wrist, the gentlest part of the arm. Warm, not yet ready. He closes the valve and adds a split of wood. This measured testing repeats through the morning. In a place built of stone, heat should be invited, not forced. The cleaning of the dome is a separate ritual. A long-handled pole with a soft cloth is lifted carefully and walked around the circle. Any collected dust or stray spider thread is gathered without scraping the glass. The dome returns a faint echo with every step, like a heartbeat. In some baths, this swish and step marks the very beginning of the day. It is not for show. It keeps light pure and the ceiling dry. As the first heat spreads, the marble grows a shade darker, and the smell of the place changes. Soap, wet stone, olive oil, and a faint mineral note from the water itself. A pair of attendants lay linen on the benches of the warm room, smoothing the fabric with the outer edge of the hand. Wrinkles are pulled to the sides, not the center, so they do not gather under shoulder or knee. It is a small courtesy that reduces the ache of a long rest. Behind the scenes there is laundry. Yesterday's towels soak in wide tubs, rinsed, wrung, and carried to a drying loft where warm air rises. A narrow stair leads up. The steps are worn shallow by many feet. Up there, the light is bright, and the roof beams smell of sun. Towels are hung with space between, so air passes. The edges are squared by hand. Later, when they are folded, the corners will align without fuss. The hot chambers basins, called kurna, receive their first bowls of water. The sound is steady and hollow, like a ladle on a drum. The attendants pour and wait, watching the puddles gather and fall away. They do not need clocks. The drip and rise of water teaches time. A novice learns this rhythm by working beside an elder. Nothing is hurried. In many trades of the past, and in this one too, the lesson is not in words but in repetition. When the door is finally unbarred, the light outside has shifted from blue to pale gold. The first guests will come slowly, an older man who likes the hottest corner, a craftsman with soap already wrapped in cloth, a boy bringing the packet of tea for his father's rest afterward. In another quarter of the city, Owinans will arrive later, with its own attendants, its own steady routine, the same movements, different voices. In both spaces, privacy and cleanliness are the goal, and the craft is the same. Water at the right warmth, stone at the right touch, and hands that know when to be present and when to step back. A side note, offered gently, in an age before piped bathrooms and household heaters, public baths carried the comfort of a home shared by the neighborhood. Cleanliness here is not a luxury. It is a patterned habit, affordable by many. Guided by workers who keep the pattern from breaking, the attendants are part janitor, part host, part quiet timekeeper. The head attendant walks the rooms one last time before the day begins. He pauses at the belly stone, presses his palm flat, and feels the stored heat return the touch. The bath is ready. The routine has been set, water drawn, cloth laid. Tools to hand. For the next hours the attendants will move like threads, stitching small comforts into stone and stone. The bolt lifts from the outer door, and morning slips in with the first guests. Shoes are left on the threshold. Voices drop to a murmur as if the building itself asked for quiet. In the entrance hall, timber above, marble below, an attendant offers light cotton wraps, the pextable folded with their fringes aligned. The cloth is thin but strong, easy to knot, easy to wash. Hands move without fuss, a nod of welcome, a gesture toward a bench, a reminder to keep valuables in a small wooden box that slides into a pigeonhole behind the counter. Every person carries a little bundle of needs. Some bring their own soap, kite, and scrap fabric. Some bring a worn keys, the exfoliating knit whose weave is firm but not harsh. A regular hands over a pair of nylon wooden clogs with carved heels so the leather straps can be oiled while he bathes. The head attendant notes who has entered. He keeps a mental ledger rather than a written one, guided by faces and habits. The path inward follows a temperature scale. First, a lukewarm chamber where breath relaxes and skin forgets the air outside. The light is pearly here, bounced from low ceilings and pale tile. Water bowls, metal, dented from years of use, stand where they always stand. An attendant moves along the line with a small hammer, tapping each spout. The tiny knocks tell him whether a valve needs a touch tighter or looser. This sound is part of the morning music. Soon the body asks for more warmth, and the doors swing to the sikakok, the hot room under the dome. Heat here is not a blow, it is a gentle, steady press rising from the gibek tawi in the center. Guests spread their pextamos on the stone and lie down, first on the back, then the side, then the stomach, letting warmth seep into shoulders and hips. An attendant carries a long-handled dipper. He pours a thin ribbon of water across the stone, and a breath of steam rises, soft as fabric. Work for the attendants increases by degrees. One sweeps the water toward drains with a palm fiber brush, never letting puddles stay where a foot might slip. Another circles with bowls disfilling from the basins and handing them to those seated along the wall. The basins themselves are set to mix. One valve runs hotter, one cooler. It is an old design that allows anyone to tailor comfort without asking. The attendants still listen, though they can tell from the tilt of a wrist whether someone prefers a warmer pour. When skin has softened under heat, the telek, the bath worker who scrubs and massages, begins his slow circuit. He wears his own pextamo, tied tight for ease. He greets with a small nod, asks nothing, and dips the keys in water. The first passes are light, the way one might dust a table. Then firmer strokes follow arms, shoulders, back, calves, always respectful, always measured. The glove's texture lifts fine rolls from the skin, evidence of a layer the body is ready to shed. This may sound strange to modern ears, but in places without daily showers, such thorough weekly scrubbing kept skin clear and comfortable. Beside him, another attendant prepares foam. He sinks a woven bag into a bowl of soap solution and lifts it high with a practiced squeeze. He releases long ropes of bubbles that drift down like slow snow. The telek cages the foam with his hands and spreads it along muscles he has already warmed. Movements are economical, almost meditative. Press, glide, rinse, repeat. Water temperature is tested often, always with the back of the wrist. No thermometer is needed. A lifetime of mornings has calibrated his sense. The dome gathers whispers and returns them softened. A cough folds into the stone and fades. A bowl set down with care makes a dull note that hangs and then dissolves. The attendants are careful with noise. Even cleaning is quiet, the brush pushed rather than slapped, the drains checked with a touch instead of a clatter. Baths like this rely on a compact between workers and guests. You come here to be surrounded by sound that asks nothing of you. Between tasks, the workers keep an eye on small economies. A towel with a frayed edge is pulled aside to be ended later. Soap slivers are saved for laundry use. The furnace is fed in thin layers rather than large armfuls, so heat stays even. A young helper runs upstairs to the drying loft to flip towels, then stands by the hatch, letting the warmer air brush his face before he returns to the floor below. The house teaches resourcefulness the way a garden teaches watering, steadily, without speech. In a side alcove, water cool enough for drinking waits in clay jars. An attendant fills tiny glasses and sets them on a tray with slices of candied peel. On slower days, there is also sherbet fruit syrup diluted with cold water or pale tea. Guests sip in silence or speak quietly with a friend. Conversation here gravitates toward weather, the price of olives, the health of a parent. The attendants listen only to needs: more water, a towel, another pour. A brief note on customs, offered gently. Many baths held separate hours for women, tended by native female attendants whose work followed the same pattern of warmth, scrubbing, and foam. Domestic rhythms were woven into these hours. Friends bathed together, washed hair with fragrant powders, and borrowed one another's combs. The social side existed, yet the core remained the same: cleanliness delivered by steady hands and predictable steps. As midday approaches, the routine tightens. Heat peaks. The teller checks his list kept in memory and spaces his clients so no one waits long on the stone. He has learned to read the room, a shoulder rising against a knot, a knee that wants a folded toe, a sigh that asked for a slower pour. He answers, each without asking questions. The head attendant circles once more, palm to marble, feeling for any place where warmth goes. He adjusts vents in the furnace room not by looking at gauges, but by listening to the sound of draw through the flue. Not every task is visible. In a narrow corridor, a worker empties gutters that catch what the eye does not see: lint, stray hair, a leaf carried in on someone's heel. He works with a small basket and a short-handled scoop. The corridor is his whole world for half an hour, and when he is finished, no one will know why the place felt so clean, only that it did. The last act before a rest is the cooling. Guests move back to the warm room, then out to the antechamber, letting their bodies descend the temperature ladder. An attendant wraps a dry towel around each set of shoulders with a careful cross at the chest, a touch learned by feel. A comb is offered. A drop of rosewater touches the wrist. Skin, thoroughly warmed and rinsed, meets air without shock. By early afternoon, the bath settles into a quieter cycle: fewer arrivals, longer rests. The attendants undo and redo what morning has done: folding, rinsing, testing, and watching. The building holds a steady hum like a beehive running at half speed. Steam feathers out from the hot room door each time it opens, and then fades, as if nothing happened. It is in these unhurried hours that the craft shows most clearly. Nothing dramatic occurs, yet everything is kept from failing: temperature, light, water, cloth, and human comfort, all balanced by people who prefer to be unnoticed. After the midday swell, the building exhales. Heat is still present, but its edge softens, voices thin to a few careful conversations. This is the hour when the attendants turn toward tasks that never show in the mirror but support everything the mirror reflects. They prefer this tempo steady, almost clockless where hands can move through quiet work without interruption. In the laundry loft, towels that dried in the rising air are taken down and folded along the same crease each time. Two workers stand across from one another, lifting and settling fabric in a rhythm that needs no counting. Frayed corners are clipped and hemmed with small, even stitches. Cotton carries the day's faint scents olive steam, stone and releases them as it cools. Bundles are tied with twine and stacked by size, large for wrapping, medium for shoulders, small for hair and hands. Nothing is written down, storage is arranged by touch and habit. A boy rinses the keys mitts in a basin set aside for that purpose. He turns each one inside out, shakes loose the fine grit, and presses it flat against a board so the weave will dry evenly. When a glove becomes too smooth to lift what it should, it is demoted to floor duty for a week before being retired completely. The demotion is not wasteful. It is a last use written into the glove on the day it was woven. Down by the furnace room, fuel is managed like a pantry. Slender kindling, thicker splits, and half-round logs are stacked in alternating courses so air can pass. An older attendant checks the draft by holding a feather near the flue. The way it leans tells him if a vent should open or close. He keeps a rake for ash and a bucket for stray embers, moving both with care. Work near fire is unhurried on purpose. In places built of stone and wood, patience is a safety device. Floor maintenance is another loop that repeats without announcement. A long-handled brush pushes a thin sheet of water toward the drains. The worker does not force the flow, he guides it, so slick patches cannot surprise a foot. Where the marble has grown smooth with age, he sprinkles a pinch of fine sand, then sweeps again until the surface is even. If a hairline crack shows in the grout, a small pot of lime putty appears, and the line is filled with a finger and smoothed with the side of the thumb. The repair is humble and nearly invisible, which is the point. The dome receives attention in the afternoon as well. A ladder is lifted with two people, feet placed on the same old scuffs in the floor. The glass discs set into the roof are cleaned with a soft rag dampened in distilled water kept for this task. Soap never touches these lenses. Residue would bloom under heat and dim the light. The worker wipes in gentle circles, steps down, and looks from different angles to find smudges the eyes miss straight on. The job is not long, but it asks for care. At a small table in a cross-ventilated corner, an attendant grates bars of olive soap into a bowl, then warms the shavings in a water bath until they melt to a custard-like gloss. A spoonful of laurel oil is stirred in for resilience. Too much would overwhelm the nose. He tests the mixture by drawing a line with his fingertip. If the furrow holds its edges before closing, the lather will rise high and rinse clean. The bowl is covered with a cloth so dust cannot settle while it cools. Elsewhere, wooden sandals wait for repairs. Leather straps are softened with a dab of oil worked in with a thumb. Peg soles are tightened by tapping the pins gently back into place. If a peg breaks, a new one is whittled from olive offcuts. Spares are kept in a small tin that rattles a soft, friendly sound whenever it is opened. Each pair of sandals has seen many floors. Each resoled patch is a small biography in wood. Refreshments rotate with the weather. On warmer days, rosewater-laced sherbet is mixed in a clay jug and set inside a second vessel filled with cool water to take the heat down. On cooler afternoons, a brass kettle murmurs on a trivet, and pale tea is poured into narrow glasses that fit easily between sorting and folding. The head attendant reminds the youngest worker to drink as often as the guests do. A place devoted to water teaches a person to mind their own thirst. Occasionally a small fault reveals itself, nothing dramatic, just a hinge that clicks or a latch that resists. A pouch of tools lives under the counter, a stubby screwdriver, a file, a tiny brush for oil. These items are not impressive, and that is why they work. They match the scale of the problems at hand. Squeaks are cleaned, not hidden. Doors are eased, not forced. The building answers kindness in kind. A quiet cultural note belongs here, offered simply. Public bathing across many cities and centuries was more than washing. It served as a place to reset the day. The attendants made that reset possible. Their craft is not only heat and water ease. Predictability. The body trusts rooms where little surprise is it. Routines reduce decision-making. And from that reduction, rest is built. In the hot room, the Clerk takes a brief break, sitting on the low step by a basin and stretching his fingers under a coal pour. He does not leave the chamber completely. He listens for the small signals that invite his return. A bowl set down without haste, a guest shifting to sit upright, a hand lifted halfway to ask for help without speaking. The Clerk has learned to read a dozen languages called posture. By late afternoon, sunlight slants through high vents and touches the marble with a warmer tone. The head attendant makes a slow inspection loop through every space. Outer hall, warm room, hot chamber, furnace mouth, drying loft, corridor, and back. He notes 3 things to deal with before evening: an edge to smooth on a bench, a fray to stitch on a towel, and a basin spout that wants a new washer. He files them in memory under the hour when he prefers to do them, usually just as the lamps are lit. A worker takes a moment to prepare attar for the cooling room, rose for wrists, maybe orange blossom if stores allow. He dips a reed, touches it to a saucer, then to his own forearm, confirming that the scent is faint and disappears quickly. Fragrance should greet and then step aside. Cling is not welcome where people come to feel clean. The afternoon closes with a small exchange between guests and staff that looks like nothing at all. A towel is offered at the exact height to meet a hand without either person adjusting their reach. A bowl arrives when the eyes glance toward it, not before. A sandal is turned so its strap faces the foot that will slide inside. None of this is urgent. All of it reduces friction by an ounce or 2, and by the end of a visit, those ounces add up to calm. As the sun lowers, the attendants prepare for the evening's cooler hours, lamps trimmed, wicks cut square, water lines checked once more for a steady mix. The bath has the feeling of a book held open with a thumb ready to continue. Not eager to finish, the building hums in place, and the people within it hum as well, as if matching its note. Evening approaches by degrees, not by announcement. The hard white of afternoon turns honeyed, and the dome's glass eyes dim from within. An attendant makes a small circuit with a brass snuffer and scissors, trimming wicks on wall lamps so their flames stand short and steady. Each lamp is tested by cupping a hand around the flame to feel the heat on the palm. To tall means smoke, to short means flicker. The goal is a quiet, unwavering light that asks nothing of the eyes. Guests now arrive in twos and threes. Workers finish with their day. An elder who prefers this gentler warmth. A traveler given directions by a shopkeeper. Shoes are collected, pexdamos offered. And the tone slips even lower than morning in the warm room. Voices flatten to a murmur and stay there. Bowls are passed as though they belong to the space. More than two hands. The hot chamber is different under lamps. Shadows pull at the base of the columns. The belly stone holds a soft glow like bread kept near a hearth. The telec works in measured arcs, mindful that evening skin off a nest for less pressure. He lets foam cover the muscle like fallen snow, then rinses it away with a thin, even stream. His steps are smaller now, anchored by the steady tap of wooden sandals. Simple rules guide movement after dark. Never cross behind a guest who may stand. Announce your turn with a light touch on the shoulder. Keep tools to one side so feet find only stone. Elsewhere, a young helper refills the drink jars. He lowers a clay vessel into a larger one, cradling cool water, an improvised bath that takes the day's heat out of the sherbet. He slices candied peel into thinner slivers as evening tongues prefer less sugar. A tin tray receives narrow glasses with a soft chime that fades almost at once. He places the tray where eyes can find it, but where steam will not bead the glass. In the laundry loft, the last load of the day is wrung and hung. Fabric that won't dry before closing is spread flat on slatted racks so air may drift between layers overnight. Cloth remembers how it was left. A neat rest means an easy morning. Down the stair, bundles of fresh towels are staged by size on a low bench, large, medium, small, within arm's reach of the cooling room. The corners align like playing cards tapped on a table. A short note on money handling. As gentle context, many houses settle accounts without spectacle. A shallow wooden tray holds coins, each type in its own pocket. The head attendant does the sums with quiet fingers, sometimes rounding down for an elder, sometimes receiving fair payment in kind. A jar of olives, a handful of soap chips from a merchant. Records often live in memory, tied to faces and routines. The craft is hospitality as much as hygiene. The ledger is kept in trust. Back in the hot room, the last thorough scrub of the day is offered. The telec knows when a session should be short. A guest who yawns 3 times, a shoulder that drops in relief when foam settles, a hand that lingers on the bowl as though it weighs more than it does. He abbreviates steps without losing order. Warmth, met foam, rinse, rest, allowing the body to coast into stillness. Even thoroughness can be light when the hour is late. Around the edges of the room, attendants tend small repairs that cannot wait for morning. A drip at a basin is quieted with a fresh fiber washer made soft by a moment in warm water. A chip at the edge of a step receives a thin bead of lime putty smoothed with a damp fingertip. Tools are wrapped in cloth so they do not clink. Anything that would clang is left for daylight. The building is asked to sleep, and the workers keep their promise. The furnace room takes on a different sound after dusk. Logs are added in modest portions, spaced so flame draws evenly without surging. A rake gathers ash into a bucket made from an old cauldron rim. The bucket is carried with 2 hands, feet set square for the turn. Ash that is fully cooled will later be sifted, some to scour floors where needed, some to the waste pit, a small portion saved for polishing copper. The line between fuel and cleanser is thin. The house knows both uses by heart. In the warm room, the cooling ritual slows even further. Attendants wrap shoulders with dry cloths that have been aired in the loft's last heat. A few drops of rosewater touch the inner wrist, not the throat, so the scent does not rise too strongly into the face. Combs are placed teeth up in a shallow dish. Anyone asleep in the corner, head tipped back against the wall, mouth parted, is given time to wake gently. No one is hurried toward the door when legs remember gravity again. As traffic thins, the long-handled floor brush returns, trailing a thin line of clean water toward the drains. The brush is lifted at thresholds to avoid leaving a ridge where a toe might catch tomorrow. In corners, a cloth around a forefinger chases stray lint and hair from grout lines. The work is neither glamorous nor quick. It is careful and final. A well-closed day clears the way for a soft beginning tomorrow. Lamps are snuffed in order, not all at once. Corridor first, then outer hall, then warm room, leaving the dome last so eyes may adjust. Each snuff is a small sigh. The hot room door is set ajar to let warmth stretch into the hall and equalize the air. A wedge of wood keeps the gap as narrow as a fingertip, the same wedge used every night, worn smooth and friendly to the hand. There is a quiet etiquette to the final minutes. The head attendant makes a last round with an open palm on stone, checking for hidden puddles, listening for a hiss that says a valve is too proud, feeling for a chill that hints at a vent out of place. He collects left items: soap wrapped in cloth, a comb, a single sandal without its parent, places them in a shallow basket behind the counter. Found things always have a place to wait. When the last guest steps into the antechamber, an attendant brings a towel already warmed by the loft's lingering heat. The guest stands a moment, the towel crossed at the chest, then dresses with the same care as when the day began. Coins ring softly in the tray, a greeting and a good night at once. The door opens to the cooler air of the street, and the building breathes out. Closing is not a switch, it is a gentle taper. Bowls are nested, keys knits are spread so their weave will dry true. A single lamp remains lit near the counter while the floor drains finish their faint conversation. The key returns to its cord. The head attendant stands for a moment in the now still hall, hearing the building's silence and finding it correct. Outside, night has taken the lanes. Inside, warmth lingers in the marble like a stored memory. The attendants leave in twos, sandals tucked under arm. Door eased shut, bar lowered without thud. The bath is not empty so much as resting stone holding heat, water at peace. Tools set where hands will find them before dawn. Night does not last long in a house that keeps water warm. Even with the door barred, the building holds a slow pulse, each stored in marble, a faint mineral scent on the air, the memory of steam folded into stone. Before the street rouses, the head attendant returns with the same heavy key on the same worn cord. His palm knows the iron's coolness. His shoulder remembers the pressure it takes to set the bar aside without scraping wood. Inside, the rooms are dim and correct, bowls nested, mitts spread on boards to dry flat, towels stacked with their fringes aligned. He stands still for a breath and listens, not for noise, but for the absence of it. Silence can be untidy if a valve weeps or ash cools unevenly. Today it is clean, the hush is even, like a held note. He moves first to the furnace, brushing ash into a copper pan, tapping the grate so spent charcoal falls in a soft ream. The fresh fire is coaxed with thin splits set like a small bridge. Then thicker wood once the draw catches. He does not chase flames. He invites them. In buildings of wood and stone, patience is the safest tool. Two attendants arrive with bundles at the shoulder. laundered pectamels, still carrying a faint rooftop breeze. They hang the first day's towels high in the drying loft to warm in the rising air. The loft will be the place guests last feel before leaving, in the form of cloth that has held warmth without scorching. A broom collects yesterday's fine grit in the corner's hair like thread, a grain of sand, a leaf edge carried in on a heel. These small removals are a defense against slips and against irritation. Comfort in a bath often begins at the scale of dust. Down in the hot room, the Clerk presses his hand flat to the belly stone. It's cool in the center, warmer toward the edges where heat lingered longest. He understands the slab as another worker might understand a bench, where it bends, where it holds, where pressure should be less. He wipes the surface with a cloth wrung from water that is nearly warm, not hot, to wake the stone gradually. Nearby he sets out the day's first mitts, coarser and finer, so he can choose by sight later without rummaging. Soap is checked and made ready. The bowl of yesterday's melted olive lather has set to a pale gel. He loosens it with a little warm water, stirs until it becomes silk again, then dips a woven bag and lifts. A long rope of bubbles rises, then collapses into the bowl. He nods a private sign that the bag will sing one swung over a back. He covers the bowl with cloth to keep dust from falling in during the pre-dawn bustle. A boy new to the house learns the route by shadow. He walks the rooms with the head attendant, who names nothing and points to little, yet teaches everything. Where you stand to reach a basin without wetting your sleeve, how far to swing a door so it does not tap the jamb, how to turn a towel once on the bench so the dry side meets a guest's shoulder first. The boy watches hands, not faces. Many trades once passed down this way through proximity, repetition, and quiet correction. The dome receives its morning care. A rag dampened with distilled water circles each glass lens set in the roof. Soap would make a film, only water is allowed. After wiping, the attendant steps back, lowers his gaze, and then raises it again. Smudges often hide unless the eyes move. Satisfied, he taps the ladder's rung twice before lifting it down, a small signal to the other set of hands that share the weight. Inventory is a matter of touch and memory. The head attendant rests his palm on the stacks. Large towels feel dense and slow to spring back. Head cloths are thinner and spring quicker. He does not count, he weighs. He flips the top stack to place the freshest cloth at the bottom, not because new is better, but because evenness is. A basket of sandals is sorted by strap tension. Leather dries hard near heat. Each pair gets a thumb's worth of oil rubbed along the underside so the strap yields smoothly later when a damp foot seeks it. There is always a small repair to bring into the day. This morning, a basin spout that dripped once at closing, a fiber washer softened in warm water, is fitted behind the nut. The attendant tightens not to the point of stubbornness, but until the feeling of drag becomes resistance that is the sign to stop. Over-tightening makes Metal soap, learned hands resist that urge. A cultural aside belongs here, placed gently. In cities where private bathrooms were not the default, the bathhouse offered predictability to bodies and schedules. The attendant's craft gave shape to that predictability. Across generations, they kept pattern from fraying water at a promise warmed floors without surprise, tools where the fingers expect them. This is how public comfort grows, not from spectacle, but from repetitions that rarely need to be named. As heat rises, the hot and cold lines are tested with the back of the wrist. One attendant opens the hotter valve to hear the water's voice a higher, thinner note and the cooler to hear the lower tone. He mixes a bowl by ear, then by skin, and sets it down where someone will reach without looking. He believes the best help is the kind found by accident at the moment it is wanted. Laundry from the previous day is brought down now that the loft has warm air to spare. Towels are folded along known creases, smoothed with the heel of the hand, stacked with corners aligned. When a fringe looks tired, it is combed and trimmed. Fray is not failure, it is a reminder that cloth works for a living. A pile of near-spent towels is tied for errands, floor drying, bench covers during sanding, the low tasks that ask for fabric that can be stained without regret. Refreshments are prepared with the same light hand. A syrup of sour cherry is thinned with cool water, and a drop of rose. The taste is there and then gone. Sweetness is not meant to linger where heat already fills the senses. Small glasses stand in a shallow tray with a cloth underneath to catch the beads that form where air meets chill. Before the first guest, there is a moment of stillness kept for its own sake. The head attendant walks the route he will walk all day, not to inspect but to welcome the work. He lets his fingers trail along the smooth shoulder of a column. He pauses at the door to the hot room to feel the breath of warm air slip across his knuckles. He touches the counter where coins will make a soft, regular music. These gestures look like habits. They are also a quiet pledge. People arrive soon after. A man who likes the same bench each Wednesday, an apprentice tailor with soap wrapped in cloth, a traveler whose shoulders carry road dust. The door receives them all at the same slow speed. The building's pulse rises by a measure, and the attendants begin their weave, pouring, folding, scrubbing, sweeping, stitching the day together without knots. What does good work look like in such a place? It is almost invisible. No puddle waits where a heel will find it. No towel edge bites into a neck. No bowl arrives too hot for the skin that expects it. The furnace does not sulk. The drains do not argue. The dome does not cry. If an elder naps in the warm room, he wakes without a startled shoulder. If a child laughs at foam rope sliding from a bag, the laugh echoes and then lies down. By the time the street outside fully wakes, the bath has been ready for some hours. It will end the same way it began, with hands closing the loop so tomorrow starts without scrape or snag. The attendants will go out into the lanes with the scent of olive and stone clinging lightly to them, unnoticed by most, recognized by a few. Their pride is not in being seen, but in leaving nothing jagged behind. And so our first story rests where it began, in a room of steam and stone, kept ordinary by careful people. As the lamps dim and the marble cools, let's step into sunlight on slow-moving water. Ahead, reed banks and earthen embankments, notched sticks and clay notes. We will walk beside canal keepers in Babylon, where silt gates and time are measured by steady hands and a river's patient breath. Before the sun climbs high enough to harden the earth, the canal keepers step out along the embankment. The ground is cool and faintly damp. Reed shadows lie long and slender across the packed clay. A small breeze presses the stalks together so they speak in a dry whisper, and the water answers with a low, even sound against the retaining wall. This is the hour when the day can be shaped gently, before heat asks for shorter thoughts and slower movements. Each keeper carries simple tools that have learned their owner's hands. A notched measuring rod smoothed by many seasons. A coil of rope, scratched with marks to count spans between posts. A wooden scoop, wide and shallow, for persuading silt away from a gate. A short mattock for trimming the bank where footprints have frayed its edge. The handles shine where palms always land. Nothing is new, everything is serviceable. They stop first at the little shelter set back from the channel, a frame of tamarisk poles, roofed with woven reeds. On the shelf sits a clay bowl whose narrow hole in the base turns it into a water clock. The keeper fills it from a jar and sets it to float in the basin. When it sinks, a turn along the lateral ditch is finished, another field's time begins. The bowl is not exact to the grain, but it is fair to the people who depend on it, and fairness is the point. A list of names incised weeks ago while the clay was still soft rests on a flat brick. The order is familiar, plots aligned by distance, size, and seniority, shuffled when a bank mended late or a gate was lent to a neighbor. The eldest keeper traces the lines with a fingertip, dust settling in the grooves and making them visible again. He nods, sets the brick down, and walks to the first gate. The gate is a modest thing to boards held in a frame, lifted with rope and a wooden peg. Its wood smells of river and sun. A younger keeper braces his feet, takes the rope, and leans back with steady weight. The boards rise a hand's width. Water pours through, first eager, then steady. The man on the bank watches how the surface changes downstream. A bright curl means too much. A dull slide means not enough. He signals with two fingers angled like a bird's beak, a sign agreed upon long ago. The rope is eased until the sheet of water settles into the pace they want. Silt is both enemy and gift. It builds where water rests and moves where water moves. Crops love it, gates do not. A keeper steps into the shallows where the bottom is firmer than it looks, toes feeling for the lip of the sill. He pulls the wooden scoop through the brown softness, lifts, and guides the load into the current. The scoop is not swung, it is coaxed. If the movement is right, the flow takes the mud away as though it had chosen to go. You may imagine this work loud. It is not. There is talk, but it stays near the mouth. A single word for enough, another for a little more, a brief call for rope. The sounds that carry are practical: the wet scrape of the scoop, the knock of a peg sliding into place, a reed mat slapping mud as it is laid to shield a soft patch of bank. The rest is water's voice, low and even, ticking time for people whose days obey its pace. They walk the long side of the main channel to check for small injuries. A footprint near the edge that has pulled the clay loose is pressed back with a flat board. A hairline crack found by and confirmed by fingertip receives a smear of mud mixed with chopped straw. The mixture gleams where it is smooth, then dulls as the first heat drinks the surface dry. Repair here is more tending than rebuilding, frequent, light, and uneventful. Dragonflies skim close to the water, and egret steps with the care of a person who knows the cost of a misstep. Beyond the reeds, fields lie in quiet grids, some still silver with dew, others starting to show the rough green of young barley. At the head of one field, a farmer waits with a spade. He has counted his turns in this season many years. He knows roughly when the little bowl will sink. When the keeper lifts his hand, the farmer opens his small gate, and water enters his furrow with a sigh, dusty soil turning dark in a thin line that lengthens down the field's back. A basket of tools rides on a low sled pulled along the bank. Inside, extra pegs, a knife for cutting rope ends square, a small hammer of wood, a handful of reeds bound together for brushing away grit. There is also a purse of resin, and bitumen for sealing a stubborn leak. The smell of the pouch is sharp, and Terry familiar as bread. It is opened rarely. When it is, the keepers work with patience, warming the mixture in the sun before pressing it into a seam and smoothing it with wet fingers. They pause mid-morning under the reed roof. Bread scored with a thumbprint pattern comes out of a cloth. Dates arrive from a small jar that has kept them soft. A skin of watered beer passes, the taste faint and good against dust. They eat without hurry, watching the water clock settle into its second half. It lists for a moment when it is nearly done, then drops with a soft gulp, disappearing into the basin like a small fish. The eldest keeps an eye on the list, wipes his thumb along the next line, and rises. A note about order offered gently. In crowded seasons, the schedule must be believed by everyone, or the ditch becomes a quarrel. The keeper's authority is quiet and persistent. They appear before argument begins, stay where eyes can find them, and keep words short. Their steadiness, day after day, makes the turns feel like clockwork even when the clock is a clay bowl in a shallow pan. Along the smallest channel, the banks are new and a little raw. Reed bundles, tied tightly and staked with tamarisk pegs, serve as a soft barrier where the earth has not yet learned to stand. A keeper taps each stake with the wooden hammer, listening for the tamped echo that means it is seated. Where water has not at a corner, he tucks in a fresh mat and steps it down with his heel, rising and pressing until the mat and mud hold hands. By late morning, heat begins to gather. The keepers work in shirts that breathe and belts that hold small things gored. Knife or roll of thin line for measuring a width when footsteps would be too clumsy. Sandals lift and settle without slap. The bank likes feet that show respect. Hats of woven palm shade the face without trapping air. Sweat gathers, but there is wind, and the wind is kind. They finish the circuit at a small spillway where excess is allowed to escape to prevent pressure on a bend. The boards are lifted a little more to prove the path, then eased to a trickle. The keeper who watches this section loves small numbers. He counts quietly as droplets fall from the lower edge and adjusts a finger width at a time. Too little spill makes the bend sulk. Too much steals from a neighbor. The right amount is soft and forgettable. Before they return to the shelter, they look once more along the water. The channel's skin shows them what they need. Bright ripple where a shallow stone lies, glass where depth keeps the wind's hand away, a brown lace where silt is ready to settle. They file these notes behind the day's list, not on clay, but where a person's habit keeps such things ready to be taken down again when evening suggests what tomorrow should be. For now, the water keeps its promise. The bowl in the basin fills again. The next field waits with a small gate and a spade set upright like a flag. By the time shadows pull short and the reeds stop rustling, the day leans toward heat. The keepers answer with smaller movements and longer breaths. Hats are set a little lower, belts loosened a notch, and tasks are rearranged so the slowest jobs meet the brightest stars, where the morning asked for walking, noon asked for watching. At the shelter, the floating bowl completes another sinking. A keeper tips it to drain, runs a finger around the hole to clear grit, and refloats it with a measured pour from the jar. Beside the basin, a thin stick stands upright, painted with a stripe at mid-height. When the water reaches that mark, they know the morning half is gone. The stick is not a clock. Not exactly, but it comes the other way a familiar mark on a doorframe does. It makes time seem friendly. Gate etiquette grows more deliberate as heat rises. A keeper never stands where a farmer's view of the water would be blocked. He waits to be seen before he gestures, using agreed signals rather than a shout. To fingers pinched for less, an open palm for hold, a flat hand lowered for close a little. When rope must be lifted, it is lifted together, the pull shared so no arm wastes itself. The peg that locks the rope is seated with a downward twist and a soft tap, never a strike. A gate that is slammed learns to resist. A gate that is respected keeps its promise. On a lateral channel, children have arrived with reed wands to plant along the edge of the field as the water advances. Their job is simple and useful. Mark how far the flow has reached when the bowl sinks, so tomorrow's turn starts where today's left off. They place each wand with 2 hands, push with the heel, and step away without trampling the damp soil. One child ties a knot in a cord at every 3rd wand. When she brings the cord back like a story, the keeper can see the field as if he had walked it. Silt work shifts from effort to finesse. In the hottest hour, they do not carry heavy mud from place to place. Instead, they coax the current to carry its own burden. A reed mat, set at a slant near an obstruction, persuades the flow to widen and lighten. A low brush made of bundled stalks smooths the bed so there is no sharp lip to catch and drop the load. If a bend tends to hoard silt, the keeper nudges the upstream edge with a foot, just enough to change the line of the water by a finger's width. These nudge-sized decisions are the craft's art. They spare tomorrow labor by teaching the channel how to behave today. From a leather pouch, one of the keepers takes small clay tags, flat ovals impressed with a simple mark. Each tag corresponds to a field whose owner has asked to trade an afternoon turn for an early morning one later in the week. The keeper strings 2 on a cord and hangs them from a peg at the shelter. This is how they remember favors, at eye level in air where the sun will remind them, rather than a book that might be lost to damp. Quiet arrangements like these are common in irrigation societies. They help markets and meals, weddings and funerals happen when they should without stealing water from a neighbor. The path along the bank receives its own attention. Where many feet have loosened the edge, a keeper sets a long reed mat and sprinkles damp earth over it, stepping along the length until footfalls land on firmness rather than crumble. Where a crack has opened a mouth in the embankment, he mixes a handful of straw into wet mud and presses it in with a thumb, smoothing the rim with the side of his hand. The hand shape is not decoration. It hides the seam from the sun so it will not curl and open again. At a spillway farther down, a small leak beads along the underside of a board. Bitumen and resin are warmed in the sun on a flat stone until they yield under a thumb. The keeper wets his fingers in canal water, then presses the dark paste into the seam, working it with the heel of his hand until the bead stops forming. The smell is sharp and familiar, the way a baker knows the scent of hot grain. He waits a minute, watches for a fresh gloss, sees none, nods once, and moves on. Meals are taken where air moves. A woven fan leans against the shelter's post. It is used in turn without ownership, the way a dipper for drinking is used. Bread is broken along the same quartered pattern as yesterday and the day before. A pattern saves thought when heat asks the mind for quiet. Dates are shared because sweetness keeps speech gentle. The skin of watered beer is passed leftward, always left, so a hand can find it without looking. Even their eating has learned canal rhythm. Predictable, kind to the senses, easy to pick up again when a shadow falls across a gate and calls someone back to work. On the main channel, the keepers walk together to the broadest weir. A straight board across the top edge once served to gauge depth by eye, but the board has warped slightly with seasons. Rather than trust it, a keeper dips his notched rod, counting with his thumb against the marks as water climbs and falls. The measurement is not absolute, it is consistent, which is what the fields require. The rod is wiped with reeds, the notches kept free of slime. A tool that slips from the hand cannot be read. A gentle note on custom, the order of turns, the size of gates, and the rights to spill are rarely invented on the day they are needed. They arrive from earlier agreements, sometimes scratched in damp clay, sometimes spoken over many seasons until all who matter can recite them. The keeper's role is to remember in public, not to improvise in private. When a farmer comes to ask, "Is it my hour yet?" the keeper's answer carries last year with it. That weight makes the answer easier to accept. Heat crests and begins to weaken. The air feels less like a hand and more like a shawl. Work regains a little speed. The scoop returns to silt where the current has left a ruffle behind a stone. Reed stems that have fallen across the channel are drawn aside in bundles tied and staked to encourage fish to lay eggs where they will not be trampled. A boy is sent along the far bank with a coil of line to take a fresh width at a place where the channel narrows more than memory says it should. He ties the line to one tamarisk stake, wades, ties to the other, then returns with the length measured by arms and knots. The report, 1 arm less than last flood, will become tomorrow's task list without any need for complaint. The bowl sinks again till list disappear and the next field's little gate is opened. Water goes where it is invited, over a lip smoothed by a spade, down furrows already shadowed by young leaves, out toward the back where soil kept last year's shape. The keepers watch with quiet satisfaction, not because of grandeur, but because the day keeps resembling itself. In work like this, repetition is not boredom. It is proof. They end the hottest stretch by checking the far spillway one more time, easing a peg half a finger so the bend downstream does not hoard flow as the afternoon wind picks up. The change is small enough that only a careful eye could see it. The channel will feel it by evening and remember tomorrow. Before they turn back to the shelter, they look once along the water's skin, reading it the way office workers read a ledger ripples for credits, dull planes for needs, tiny whirls for small complications worth a note. The sun shifts. The wind returns. Afternoon begins. Late afternoon brings a small mercy. A breeze rises from the low horizon and threads the reeds with a cooler hand. The leaves turn their narrow faces into the wind and whisper together. The canal's surface, glassy at noon, breaks into tidy ripples that move like stitching across a wide cloth. The keepers lengthen their stride a little. Heat asks less now, and the water begins to answer in tones that are easier to read. Wind alters more than comfort. It presses the surface toward one bank, making a shallow false depth along the lee side, and a small lip on the windward edge. A keeper nails and dips his notched rod not straight down, but with a slight lean into the breeze so the measurement resembles the channel rather than the sky. The number he feels under his thumb is modestly different than middays, enough to suggest a peg at the spillway should rise by the width of a barley grain. He makes the change and watches the downstream face smooth itself from a quick silver run to a calmer gray. Evening is when fields at the tail of a lateral receive their portion. Their owners are used to this cooler water, softer light, and a longer listening for the bull's final sing. The keepers favor these hours for crops that drink slowly, such as date saplings or stands of young flax whose roots prefer a steady soak. At the shelter, the clay tags that mark traded turns are lifted from the peg and laid flat on the reed mat. A finger passes over each impress sign. A quiet voice says the names so the memory renews itself. Signals simplify in the low light. The two-finger pinch for less becomes a slow close of the hand. The open palm for hold finds the line of sight and stays there, steady as a stone. When a gate must be lifted in the last broad wash to carry silt beyond a troublesome nook, the pull is shared by two sets of hands without a word. The rope answers with a small creak, and the boards rise evenly. A peg is seated with a twist and a barrow's tap. Water slides through with a sound that resembles breathing. Silt work becomes almost conversational now. The scoop does not dig, it suggests. A reed mat set at a diagonal asks the current to choose a gentler path. Where a tiny counter eddy forms behind a root, a thumb pressed into the mud makes a shallow dimple that catches and dissolves the swirl. These are gestures more than tasks, the sort of moves that are taught by standing near a keeper for a season and doing as he does until the hand understands what the eye could not explain. Along the bank, repairs that have waited for shade emerge from the day's pocket. A hairline scene where sun and footsteps have argued receives a thin paste of clay and chopped straw pressed in and finished with the side of the hand so the repair's skin lies flush with the bank. A tamarisk stake that wobbles gets its foot set deeper with 3 small pushes of the hammer rather than one heavy strike. A rope burned dry at its bitter end is cut square and rewrapped in a simple hitch so it cannot fray overnight. The water clock floats through its last service. At the shelter, a keeper takes a fresh bowl from the shelf, turns it over, and checks that the hole is still round. If grit has worried the edge, he smooths it with a wet reed until the rim feels even under a fingertip. Bowls are humble things, but their fairness depends on small circles staying true. He sets the cleaned one aside. The seasoned bowl gets one more turn. Farmers arrive at the tail plots with low voices and deliberate steps. Their shovels are stored upright in soft earth, blades shaded by scraps of reed mat so the metal won't burn the hand. When the keeper lifts his wrist just so the little gates open along the back line and water runs into furrows that have been waiting all day. Dust darkens to a damp brown, the color rising by inches as the furrow pulls the flow along. Children count the stalks the water touches, threading small strings on their fingers to remember which rows have had their fill. The counting is not official, it is family arithmetic, and the keepers trust it because it has always been honest. A gentle note on record keeping belongs here. Some houses write in damp clay at sunset short marks for gate lifted, peg changed, mat replaced, and a name or sign for the keeper on duty. Others keep the ledger by habit alone, rehearsed aloud while sandals are hung and tools are put away. Both methods matter. A tablet helps when memory is thin. A well-kept routine helps when the tablet cracks in dry weather. Most days, they use both, a spoken list to set the mind, a pressed line to steady it. Once the tail fields are drinking, attention returns to the main channel's bends. Evening currents sometimes carry a last, Heavy gift the day's gathered silt which tries to rest in corners. The keepers keep it moving. A long brush of bundled reeds is drawn lightly along the bed, breaking the ridge so the load becomes small and manageable. If a stone has rolled oddly near the bank, a hand and a foot coax it back where it won't snag shadows. Nothing is forced. The channel is led the way a thread is led through cloth without tugging, without twisting, just with direction. Light thins. Colors flatten to two kinds, water and not water, and they are learns to lean and sound. Where flow is right, it talks quietly. Where it strains, it grows a little bright at the lip. Where it sulks, it goes dull. The keepers listen, taking short steps and letting their sandals feel the bank's truth near the edge. A torch is not needed yet. They prefer the work to sit within the day if the day will allow it. At the shelter, the last sinking of the bowl marks the final fields close. The keeper tips the basin, drains it clean, and leaves the bowl upside down to dry so no insect will build a night home in it. Names on the clay list are brushed once with the palm, the dust lifts and settles again. The core with traded tags is set aside where morning eyes will see it first. A skin of water is finished, its neck is tied and hung so the weight won't pull the mouth out of round. Tools go back to their places in denser order than morning's. Pegs nose into their pocket by size, thick to thin. The scoop's handle is wiped with a handful of reeds so sweat doesn't stiffen the grain. Rope is coiled loosely, not tight so it will not remember a curl that will fight the hand tomorrow. The knife's edge is touched to a stone twice, and no more. A kit that rests correctly wakes correctly. That is the keeper's quiet proverb. Before they step away, one of the keepers walks the length of the bank once more with empty hands. He is not measuring. He is confirming the canal's end-of-day voice. He pauses where the spillway mutters to itself, listens for a beat, and nudges the peg no more than a thumb's nail. He presses his heel into one soft place on the path until it firms. He smooths a fingerprint off a patch repair so the sun won't catch it tomorrow. These are closing gestures, ordinary and necessary, the way a door is checked with a gentle pull after it is latched. Dusk slides down the reeds. An egret lifts and crosses the channel without a ripple. Dragonflies settle on the warm posts. The keepers take the long way back, letting their eyes memorize how the channel looks when it is ready to sleep. Surface level, no bright chatter at the gates. Spillways speaking in low, even tones. They do not congratulate themselves. They prefer signs over praise, and the signs say the night will be quiet. At the shelter, sandals are knocked once against the threshold to leave dust outside. Hats are hung on the same pegs they found in morning. A last look passes between the workers, a short nod. Nothing more, and the day closes. When the reed beds turn from green to gray and the water loses its shine, the bank feels larger and quieter. The keepers do not abandon it at dark. The channel is a living line that asks for company even when fields sleep. One man remains at the shelter while the others walk home along the ridge path. He banks the little brazier with a modest ember, sets a clay lamp near the ledger brick, and lets the night take the heat out of the day. Night exchanges and senses for others. Sight steps back, hearing and touch lean forward. The keeper learns to read the canal by its voice. In darkness, right water makes a soft, even sentence. A thin, bright chatter means a gate lip has gone to lean and wants a breath more. A dull, Swallowing sound says Silt is trying to settle at a bend. He walks with empty hands, one palm hovering near the edge, feeling for the air's cool change where water gathers or slows. The lamp he carries is small and stingy with oil just enough to show the ground close to his sandals. He tilts it away from his eyes when he looks upward so the flame's little circle doesn't blind him to the larger dark. Frogs begin and then stop, begin and then stop again. Their rhythm becomes a kind of clock. Once, far down the bank, the jackal's voice rises and falls, thin as a reed. The canal keeps speaking through it all, unconcerned. At the spillway, he listens rather than looks. The wind has died, so the surface tells the truth. He touches the peg, finds it warm from the day still held in the wood, and eases it by the width of a fingernail. The change is hardly anything, but the spill's tone lowers from a quick consonant to a vowel sound that will not draw insects to the light. He leaves the lamp on the bank while he works, both hands free for rope and peg. Light can stand still, water cannot. In the slowest reach, a reed has slumped across the surface and gathered floating seeds. He does not wade by night unless he must. Instead, he uses a long hook-attained branch with a forked end to draw the reed aside. It slides to the bank and stays there, pinned with a round river stone that fits the hand. The keeper rubs his thumb along the stone's wet skin and remembers its place. He will carry it back to the same hollow tomorrow so it won't be lost underfoot. Dew comes early near water. It lays a dark line across the top of the embankment and settles into the woven mat at the shelter's door. The keeper turns the mat so the damp edge is inward, where feet will not make the clay slick. He does not call this prudence, it is simply how a person moves when the night remembers what the day has forgotten. He looks up because sound has changed wings passing, not close, not far, and sees the shape of a heron crossing the channel without touching it. From time to time he returns to the brazier and warms his hands over the steady ember. He keeps the lamp wick trimmed short so smoke does not draw insects close. The ledger brick names and order pressed into clay weeks ago sits within the lamp's faint circle. He does not read it. Night is for holding the day together, not for rethinking it. If an adjustment is needed, it is made small and at the edges. Toward midnight, a traveler passes on the far reach. Sandals hiss in loose dust, then stop. A greeting lifts across the water. No names, only peace. The keeper answers in kind, and hears the steps resume. The canal is a boundary that invites courtesy. Voices cross it narrower than in daylight, as if the water were listening for gossip, and the people prefer not to feed it. Later, the air thickens for a while. The canal's face fogs at the edges. The keeper walks slower so his sandals do not find softness where the bank's crust has taken dew. He pauses at the broad weir and counts heartbeats while he listens. A steady spill says the upstream gates are sleeping well. A thin beat along the underside of a board tells him yesterday's bitumen held. He runs a damp finger along the seam to feel for fresh gloss. None? He moves on. Just before dawn, the night changes its mind. A thread of coolness runs down the channel from the fields, and the smell tilts from warm clay to green reed. Birds choose this moment to rehearse their first notes, 2 calls at a time, then 4, then many. The keeper goes to the shelter and takes a small clay ball from a jar. He cracks it, kneads the damp inside with his thumbs, and flattens it into a thin tablet on a board rubbed smooth by years of use. A reed stylus lies on the shelf. Cuts at its tip were fresh the last time the rain kept everyone under roofs. He holds it like a small shovel and presses signs into the cool clay, simple marks. Not scribed script, enough to say, gate at the bend eased, spillway pegged by a nail, reed cleared in the slow reach. These will bake in sun at the edge of the shelter until they keep themselves. If such notes sound formal for such small deeds, consider that water remembers best when people do. The floating bowl is rinsed and examined, the hole cleared with a sliver of reed. He refloats it in the basin to test the sink. It tilts, lists, and drops in a steady measure he knows in his wrist bones. He sets a fresh jar beside it, already filled at the bank where the surface runs clean. A new scratch goes onto the doorpost at shoulder height one more evening toward the full cycle of the month. Marks like this are not records so much as habits placed where they will not be forgotten. Footsteps arrive from the village path, softer than at noon, more deliberate than at dusk. The eldest keeper returns first, carrying a strip of bread wrapped in a cloth with a twig of fresh mint tucked at the knot. He nods at the night man, sees that the lamp is short and calm, and sets the bread on the shelf. Another arrives with rope newly spliced. The splice is shown palm up and admired without words. A third brings pegs whittled from tamarisk cuttings, their ends rounded so they will not bruise the rope. Before any gate is lifted, they walk the near bank together in the half-light, the same path as always, the same checks, the same small gestures, at the same places. Dew darkens the clay where feet pass. A single frog, late for sleep, startles from a puddle no bigger than a hand, and the men pause a breath to let it go where it wants to go. The canal's voice is low and even, the spillways mumble, nothing argues. At first light, the night keeper gives over quietly. He loosens the belt that held his knife and coral, hangs both on the peg beside the lamp, and rubs the edge of his palm along the door beam, a habit the others share for luck or for nothing. He takes a sip from the jar and closes his eyes for a heartbeat longer than a blink. The daymen begin to lift the first gate a hand's width. The bowl is set to float and sink again. The canal returns to its daylight name. Dawn lifts the color back into the reed beds, and the canal looks younger for an hour. The men who keep it so step out with tools that have already learned the day's route. The oldest folds the night tablet's small notes into memory with a glance. The clay rests in sun on the shelter's ledge and will soon hold its shape without help. A fresh sequence is agreed with brief nods. No speech is wasted. Words are reserved for changes. The first lift goes to a field that waited at the tail the night before. The keeper at the gate braces his feet and raises the boards the width of 2 fingers. Water enters with a low, proper voice. The farmer sets his spade at the lip, smoothing the path so the flow does not bite. A child plants to reed wands where the furrow turns, tying a knot in a thin cord to mark the place. This is how a household remembers, without paper, string habit, and a glance that reads yesterday in the line the water leaves on the soil. By mid-morning, the rounds find their speed. The measuring rod dips without splash. The thumb finds the right notch by feel. Where wind piled the surface the previous evening, the spillway peg holds last night's small adjustment and asked for nothing more. Along the outer bank, footprints pressed deep at dusk have dried to cups that could twist an ankle. A keeper needs a plug of clay and straw and presses it in, smoothing the patch with the side of his hand so the sun will not lift it. The repair is the color of the bank within minutes, anonymous and correct. A word about fairness, placed gently. Turns are honored because they are noble. The order lives on clay in the shelter and in the heads of people who have walked these banks since childhood. Favors exist, but they are visible tags hung where any passerby can see, not secrets held under a cloak. If complaint comes, it comes early and quietly, and the keepers answer it with an open palm over the list rather than a finger pointing down a path. In places where water is the difference between a good season and a thin one, predictability is a kind of kindness. The canals ask for small education, and the keepers teach without pretending to teach. A boy is shown how to coil a rope so it falls open without snarl. A girl, our father's helper today, learns to lift a reed mat from the middle instead of the edge so it doesn't tear under its own damp weight. A young man is handed the notched rod and told to listen to the water while he counts. When he reads the depth aloud, the elder repeats the number, then adds the tone, calm, bright, lazy, because measurement alone never told the whole story. Midday returns, but it is friendlier than yesterday's. The wind keeps its stitch small, the surface carries ripples that help the icy slope. The floating bowl turns and sinks in tidy measures. Between sinks, there is maintenance that will never end praise, and is done with as much care as any larger thing. A rope end is cut square and singed over a coal so it will not fray, a knife edge sees 2, not 3, passes on a stone. A tamarisk stake gets its foot seated 1 palm deeper, where the bank wept after last flood. Silt, persistent as ever, calls for persuasion rather than muscle. The scoop draws a broad, shallow arc, not a heavy bite. The current takes what is offered and carries it past the bend. A reed brush skins the bed to flatten a ridge before it becomes a wall. At a slow place, the keeper makes a dimple with a thumb no bigger than a coin to catch a tiny whirl and teach it to rest. The canal learns from gestures as much as from gates. The gestures cost little in the moment and pay out over a season. From time to time, the rises from water to the fields. Barley tosses its heads in a light breeze. Flax leans all in one direction as if listening. A date sapling, staked and tied, draws its drink without fuss. At the back of one plot, a woman lays a wet cloth across her jars so their mouths will stay cool. The keepers notice without staring. Their job is the path water takes to those jars, not the jars themselves. Afternoon loosens its hold, and the last allocations begin. The bowl sinks. A final gate is opened for a narrow field bordered by 3 cousins. They stand together and count quietly while the water advances, each agreeing out loud when the line passes the reed that was planted at dawn. Consent spoken is easier to keep than consent assumed. There is still work in the edges. A faint leak at a joint gets a lick of warmed by 2 men. A short length of bank that keeps remembering to slump is faced with a fresh mat and stepped into place, heel by heel, like dough pressed into a pan. A frayed fringe on a rope is wrapped tight with twine spun from reed fibers so it won't grow a tassel that catches on a peg. The kid in the sled grows lighter and neater as tasks are finished, pegs back with pegs, cord with cord, scoop washed in a swish, and set in shade to dry. When the bowl makes its last soft gulp and disappears, the shelter breathes out with the man. The clay list is brushed once with the palm, the dust lifts and settles back like a bird deciding to stay. Today's small tablet 3 notes, and a sign is set aside to bake against the reed wall. A shared skin of watered beer goes around, leftward as always. Bread is broken by habit into the same quarters as yesterday, the pattern-saving thought. Dates are chewed slowly so sweetness outruns dust. Closing is a reverse of opening. Gates are set to their sleeping positions, neither too tight nor loose. Spillways whisper in even voices. The measuring rod is wiped and stood in its corner, not laid where a careless foot might find it. Ropes are hung broad so they forget the day's curls. The scoop, made from wood that drinks and yields, rests onto reeds rather than the ground so its underside dries without warping. The shelter floor is brushed once across and once down, reed mat lifted and shaken so the grit does not sew itself into the weave. Before the last hat finds its peg, one keeper walks the long line a final time with empty hands. He is not hunting, he is confirming the feeling of ready. A heel presses where the bank felt doubtful at noon, firm now. The spillway's voice is a vowel, not a hiss. Good. The bend that hoarded silt last week is flat as cloth. Better. He pauses where the path drops a finger width. Tomorrow he will carry a basket of clay to smooth it. He stores the thought where tomorrow's hands can find it. A simple kindness closes the day. A jar of clean water is left by the shelter post for a farmer who will pass before the men arrive. On a morning he must reach the city market, while the stars are still deciding whether to stay. No note sits beside it, only a jar in a place where a thirsty person would look first. This, too, is canal work. Dust puts its cool palm on the bank. Dragonflies stitch slow lines above the surface. Frogs tune down. The eldest takes the tiny lamp, pinches the wick, and leaves the faint thread of smoke to rise and disappear. Sandals knock once against the threshold to leave grit where it belongs. The ridge path carries the men home at a pace the canal has taught them, measured, unhurried, willing to repeat. The channel lies as they prefer it, level face, quiet lips, no bright chatter at the gates. It will remember their attention overnight, the way a well-made bed remembers the hand that smoothed it. As the river settles into evening, let us trade moving water for still vats. Ahead, a yard scented with steamed bark, a bamboo screen lifted with even wrists, and pale sheets brushed flat onto drying boards. Before the town wakes, a small yard fills with quiet steam. The air is cool, then warm at the hands, then cool again where a breeze slips through the gate. In this place, paper begins as a smell, damp bark, clean water, and the faint sweetness of sap. The papermakers arrive without hurry. They hang their jackets on the same nails as yesterday, roll their sleeves, and greet the vats as if greeting old friends. Stacked near the wall are bundles of slender branches cut from paper mulberry. Each bundle is tied with a twist of straw rope. The wood is light. The bark is the true cargo. A worker sets a pot to boil on a brick hearth. Steam lifts in little flags. The cut sticks go in for a brief scald, just enough to persuade the outer skin to loosen. When they come out, a second worker pulls a cord across a post and hooks each branch beneath it. With a small knife shaped like a spoon, she slides along the length, peeling off the dark outer layer in one steady ribbon. The motion is calm and practiced. The sound is soft, like cloth being folded. Now the inner bark shows pale fibrous, slightly glossy when wet. Strips are rinsed in a wooden top. Fingers search for grit caught in the grain and flick it free. This washing matters. Dust forgotten here will reappear later as a tiny roughness under a pen. The clean strips rest in water that moves, not too fast, not too slow, so any lingering bitterness can wander away. The papermakers do not speak of chemistry, they speak of taste, as if the bark were a food to be prepared with care. At a bench, a basket of roots waits. They belong to a plant kept in the garden only for this purpose. The roots are pale like thin carrots, and full of a slippery gift. A young helper trims them, pounds them lightly, and soaks them in a bucket. The water turns slightly cloudy. When he lifts his hand out, a thin thread trails from his fingers. This is the mucilage. Later, only a ladle of it will teach the vat to let fibers float evenly instead of clumping. In workshop talk it is simply the help, because that is what it gives. The inner bark moves from soaking to cooking. Not a strong boil, but a quiet simmer, long enough to soften the fibers without bruising them. A spoon of mild ashoy keeps the color calm and clears away what the first washing did not. When the strips are ready, they are lifted with a slotted paddle and laid to cool in a bamboo tray. The tray drains, the air does the rest. The room smells like rain on a warm day. Now comes the sound that neighbors know by heart. On a low block, a papermaker folds a handful of softened bark and begins to beat it with a flat wooden mallet. Not to punish it, only to open it. The mallet rises and falls in a slow, even rhythm. Fuck, breathe, fuck, breathe. Another worker joins in at a second block, staggered a beat behind. The yard becomes a metronome. Fibers loosen into threads, then into a small cloud. The bundle is turned and turned again until no long strands remain. If you were to touch it, it would feel like wet cobweb, weightless yet everywhere at once. A vat is filled with clean water. The beater's cloud is teased into it, a pinch at a time, following the surface with the spread fingers of a hand. The water goes from clear to a faint milk. A ladle of mucilage follows. The papermaker stirs with a smooth stick, drawing a slow figure eight until the water thickens just slightly. He tests it with the flat of his palm and feels a gentle drag. Got enough? The vat is ready to teach the fibers how to meet each other. On a stand waits the mold to parts that belong together. The bottom frame holds a woven screen of split bamboo. The top frame, the decal, keeps the edges true. The screen has its own voice. It sighs a little when lifted, and it holds the wet like a promise. The papermaker dips the mold into the vat and lifts it at an angle, then levels it in one controlled motion. Water sheets across the surface. Fibers settle like snow in slow air. He gives the mold a quiet shake front to back, then side to side, a movement so small it might be a gesture rather than a task. This shiver lays the fibers in many directions at once, the secret of a page that resists tearing. The first sheet is thin and shy. It returns to the vat. The second holds. A helper removes the decal. The sheet clings to the bamboo screen, shining like new eyes. With a practiced press, the papermaker kisses the sheet onto a smooth board laid beside the vat. This is the couching. The screen lifts, the sheet stays. Another board slides over it. Weight begins to gather. A stack forms, sheet board, quiet thump, and again. The rhythm is easy to hear but hard to tire of. Between dips, the papermaker skims the vat with his hand, not to stir, only to guide the surface back into itself. Fibers that wander are turned home. Now, and then he adds a gourd scoop of water to keep the level steady. Now and then the helper brings a small ladle of mucilage to keep the flow kind. Words are few. Work is a chain of gestures, each linked to the next. A note the papermakers would not write but would show light matters. Direct sun makes edges dry too fast, shade makes them too slow. So the stacks rest under a roof lip where the day comes softly. When enough sheets have stacked knee-height, two workers carry the pile to a press. It is a simple screw with a wooden plate, turned with a bar. Pressure arrives in silence. Water slips out in small streams and runs down a groove into a jar to be used again for rinsing tools. Nothing here is single-use. Even rinse water has errands. While the press holds, tools are tended. The mallets are checked for smooth faces. Any nick would bruise fibers later. The bamboo screen is brushed gently with a soft broom to lift stray bits from its weave. A splinter is found near a corner. A short length of silk thread ties it down until a calmer R can welcome repair. The decal's frame is rubbed with a cloth so the thin film of mucilage does not harden where it is not wanted. Care for tools is care for tomorrow. At midday the yard grows still for a moment. The workers sit on low stools and share rice wrapped in leaves, a few pickles, and hot broth from a small pot. No feast, but enough. Hands rest. Shoulders rest. The vats rest too. The surface smooths again. Ready to teach more fibers how to find each other this afternoon. You might think paper is born in a single act, one dip, one lift, one shake. Here it arrives as a day, then another day. Bark is peeled yesterday so it can be cooked today. Fibers are beaten now so the vat will be even an hour from now. Sheets formed in the morning will be pressed by dusk. Tomorrow they will be brushed onto warm boards to dry flat and true. It is less a job than a weather, steady, seasonal, and learned by skin. As the meal ends, the papermaker stands, turns his wrists to feel if they are ready, and steps back to the vat. The helper carries boards to the couching table, tapping their corners to remind them to behave. The mallets wait by the block. Quiet and polite, the yard inhales and exhales once, and the rhythm returns. The afternoon opens with small, repeatable motions. Hands return to the vat as if to a familiar conversation. The water has settled into the right thickness, neither thin as rain nor heavy as syrup. A finger laid flat across the surface feels a mild drag, like soap drawn over skin. That is the sign to begin again. The mold and decal meet with a soft click. The papermaker lowers the screen into the vat, not straight down, but with a gentle tilt, then lifts and levels in one smooth breath. Water shins over the bamboo lattice. Fibers drift into place. He gives the frame a light forward shake, and then a crosswise tremor so small that it seems more like a pulse than a motion. These two gestures invite the fibers to lie in many directions at once. That cross-laying is the quiet reason thin pages resist tearing when folded later. The first few sheets after a pause are always cautious. He returns one that looks too shy, keeps the next, and then finds the steady run. A helper stands beside the couching board, polished wood just wide enough for the sheet to land fully. The decal lifts away, the wet page kisses the board with a soft hiss and stays there as the screen rises. Another board goes on top, and the stack grows. Sheet board, an easy rhythm you could set your breathing to. A batch of boards soon reaches the press. It is not a complicated machine, Only a stout screw and a plate that lowers with a slow turn of a bar. Two workers lean their weight in half turns, pausing between each to listen. There is nothing to hear, and yet there is always something to sense. Water slipping down channels carved in the pressed bed, the stack's breath changing from quick to slow. The plate should meet the top board evenly. A thumb along the edge confirms this. Pressure stays until the stack sheen dulls from mirror to satin. The plate is lifted without hurry. Now the damp sheets are ready to meet warmth. The boards are carried two at a time to a long room where the air is kindly, neither hot nor stagnant. A low brazier or flue keeps the space just above cool, the kind of heat that relaxes fibers without rushing them. On one wall, drying planks stand in a simple rake. The worker slides a sheet from its board and lays it face up on the warmed plank, smoothing with a soft brush made from animal hair. The strokes are long and even, always one direction, then again the same way, never back and forth. This brushing presses the sheet flat and persuades fibers to agree with one another. If a corner lifts, the brush's tip persuades it gently. Persuasion works better than insistence. A small note: the makers keep more in body than in words. Light must not bite, direct sun will curl edges, and uneven warmth will teach waves into the page. So windows are curtained to a pale glow. Air moves, but not fast. The room hums at a level you can forget. Back in the yard, the vat is tended with small kindnesses. A handful of clean water keeps level. A ladle of the plant sap returns the bath to docile thickness. The beater's cloud of fibers is added as needed in pinches, never fistfuls. A fresh screen replaces the first so it can be brushed and rested. Screens and hands both last longer if they trade places before fatigue sets in. Apprentices glide along the edges of the work, learning by doing. One carries damp boards from the press to steps at a time, elbows close, so the weight rides the body instead of the wrists. Another wipes the bamboo lattice with a soft broom, short strokes that lift straight fibers without scouring the weave. A third wraps each couching board's corner lightly before setting it down. The tap shakes loose drops that would leave tiny pools where they do not belong. No one explains at length. The shop gives the lesson each hour, and the lesson is always the same. Small care, repeated, keeps trouble small. Halfway through the afternoon, the first dried pages return from the warm room. They slide from the planks with a faint release, no tack, no pull, and stack on a low table in loose lifts, like bread slices turned out of a pan. The papermaker leaves the pile with the side of his hand, checking for even tone against the light. He looks for three things: no darker patches where fibers gathered, no pale scars where a splinter in the screen would have scratched, and edges that hold a straight line rather than a wave. Imperfect sheets are not discarded. They find humbler lives as wrappers, blanks for practice characters, or skins for window panes where beauty lies in glow rather than crispness. Some batches will receive sizing starch thinned with warm water to give pens more control. When that is planned, a worker sets a pot near the flue so it thickens to the feel of thin cream. A brush lays the liquid in long strokes on the sheet, light, patient, even. Sized pages rest until the surface loses shine and feels cool rather than damp. Later, they may be polished with a smooth stone or a bone tool until they answer a fingertip with a faint, even drag. Calligraphy favors that drag. It steadies the brush. Tools are given constant, unshowy care. The couching boards are wiped while still slightly warm so any thin film of mucilage cannot harden at the edges. The press bed is brushed so grit cannot bruise tomorrow's pages. The mallets that beat fibers are inspected for tiny burrs if any rise. A scrap of fine paper and a touch of oil smooth them away. A nick on a mallet face will write its shape into hundreds of sheets, solving that now as part of kindness to future work. Toward late afternoon, the vat grows lighter in color. That is the sign to pause and let fibers rest rather than stretching them thin to chase a few more sheets. The papermaker lowers his hands into the bath, palms open, and draws a slow circle that collects wandering threads into the middle. He lets them settle and steps back. The workday keeps its own stopping place, declared by the material, not by a bell. In the warm room, a line of finished pages now leans against a wall in loose gatherings. If you look closely, you can see how each carries the faintest ghost of the bamboo lattice that supported it, a pattern almost invisible unless the light is right. That pattern is not a flaw. It is a memory of the tool, an honest trace of how this thing came to be. A small cultural aside fits here. Pages like these served many lives. Some were brushed with oil and pressed onto window frames to make panels that drink light and send it deeper into a room. Some became account books, stitched in quiet stacks with thread and guarded by wooden covers. Others were cut for fans, their ribs receiving paste in lines as straight as a breath held steady. An everyday object spreads its roots in many directions. The shop thinks about all of them as it works. Late in the day, the press is emptied for the last time, and the vat is skimmed clean. Fiber that remains is caught in a cloth and saved under water for tomorrow. The boards are leaned in pairs to dry, faces turned inward, so dust cannot settle on the polished grain. The screen is propped where air can move across it. The plant roots soak in fresh water so tomorrow's sap will behave as today's did. Work is not so much finished as placed gently where it can wake easily in the morning. The gate lets in evening air, jackets return to shoulders, the yard holds a damp hush, the kind that follows useful effort. A stack of sheets thin, pale, strong weights under cloth on the low table. Already cooler than the hands that made them. Nothing here calls for applause. Every part asks only to be ready to repeat. When work pauses, the yard does not quite sleep. The vats rest under boards, the press stands open, and the warm room keeps its low breath. A small lamp is left near the door, trimmed short so the flame holds steady and does not smoke. One person lingers a little longer, moving through the spaces with unhurried checks that take only minutes but prevent hours of mending later. He begins at the vat. A board lays across the surface to keep dust from straying in. With the back of his fingers he tests the water's coolness, just enough to promise that fibers waiting under cloth will not sour by morning. A gourd scoop that stayed in the bath is lifted out, wiped, and set mouth down so the rim won't warp. Tools put to bed correctly wake gentle. In the press corner, the screw is eased a half turn so the wood will not remember strain. The bed is brushed once more to find any grit the eye missed in daylight. The couching boards lean in pairs, faces together, tied loosely so air can pass but edges cannot catch. Screens are propped upright. The bamboo lattice prefers to dry standing, not lying flat where damp might sit in the weave. In the warm room, finished sheets sit in small gatherings like quiet geese along a bank. The lamp is not carried too close. Heat and light should visit, and then retreat. A fingertip glides along an edge to confirm it lies true and does not lift. If a corner shows a wish to curl, a soft brush strokes it down, and a thin weight, a smooth pebble or a lacquered slat is set there until morning. It is not scolding, only a gentle reminder of shape. There is a separate table for window paper. On it rests a shallow dish of clear oil perla or walnut, depending on what the year has given, and a brush with hair cut square. The sheet is laid on a clean board, the oil lifted sparingly, and drawn from margin to margin in long lines that overlap slightly like calm waves. The goal is not shine but a quiet translucence, a way for daylight to arrive softened rather than sharp. Excess is blotted with a second sheet. The two married, dry as one, and become a pane that will glow rather than glare. For sturdier window skins, two thin sheets may be laid together with a ghost of paste between. They are pressed with the palm edge to edge, as though smoothing a bed. When they dry on the plank, they share a single voice, a muffled tap when flicked, neither brittle nor heavy. Frames wait in another room, wooden ribs sanded smooth so the paper will not snag when stretched and tied. The door is latched, the yard grows still. Night collects around the eaves while the faint warmth in the flue keeps chill away from boards and brushes. Crickets tune low. The soft sweet scent of bark lingers under the quieter smell of wet wood. Nothing asked for. Attention, that is the sign to leave. Dawn comes pale through papered windows, proof of last evening's careful oiling. The lamp soot is gone, the room answers with a gentle glow that does not hurt waking eyes. Jackets return to nails. Sleeves rise, hands rinse in a shallow basin to wake the knuckles. The day's first sound is the mallet on the block. Thought, breathe steady as yesterday and tomorrow. Beating fibers in the morning asks for less push and more listening. The softened strips, held in cool water overnight, relax at the first touch. The mallet face is checked again, but the motion is the true test. Lift without jerk, fall without slap, turn the bundle a quarter with each few strokes. When the lump loosens to a floating cloud that holds no long strands, it is ready. A handful held up shoes thread so fine they cling to air. At the vat, the mucilage is refreshed. The root water has thickened slightly. A little clean water brings it back to friendly. When poured into the bath, it turns the surface from ordinary to cooperative. The papermaker stirs with a slow, even figure eight until his palm feels that familiar soft drag. He does not look for a number, he seeks a mood. The vet should invite, not resist. The first dip after sunrise is patient. Screen lowered at a tilt, then leveled. Water runs, fibers settle. A brief pulse forward, a slight crosswise tremor, and the sheet appears, even as fog. The decal lifts, the wet page transfers to the couching board with a sigh. Another board covers it. A chain begins that will not hurry and will not stop until the stack has reached the height that the press likes best. Apprentices bring yesterday's window sheets for trimming. Edges are cut with a long knife stroked along a wooden straight edge, not pressed downward, so the fibers yield cleanly rather than crush. Offcuts are saved. No one is surprised that scraps have work. They will paste cracks in packaging. Test brushes, or line the bottoms of drawers so small things do not click and clutter. Next to the trimming table, a simple burnishing stone rests in a cloth. Sized writing paper, when asked, receives that stone in long, steady arcs until the surface glows softly under a raking light. The change is slight to the eye but large to the hand. A brush will sit more willingly, and ink will say yes instead of maybe. Polishing is not for every sheet. Some papers are meant to drink the stroke and keep it. The shop knows which future each stack prefers. Repair is folded into mourning. A silk thread is slipped through a gap in the screen and tied in a tiny surgeon's knot to hold a wandering sliver until a full repair can be made on a rest day. The press screw sees a drop of oil up the collar where wood meets wood. A couching board that has grown a burr on one edge is rubbed with a flat of old paper and a breath of oil until it is smooth again. Each correction takes less than a minute and saves an hour when the work is busier. A brief note for context. The word paper hides a forest of uses. A stack may become the layer between pottery and rope in a vendor's bundle, or the leaves of a monk's scripture, or the skin of a kite that children will run with on the hillside in a wind that smells like pine. The makers keep all these lives in the back of the mind without naming them. The care required at the vat does not change with destiny. Late morning, the warm room is visited again. Sheets laid last night are lifted with two hands and allowed to bend on their own rather than being bent by force. Their sound is quiet. A harsh rustle would mean trouble. Pairs are tapped into alignment and stacked in small reams separated by thin boards so weight will distribute without bruising. A slip of paper, marked with a brush dot, sits between bundles to remind someone later which batch was sized and which was left pure. The rhythm continues: dip, set, press, brush, dry, each step small enough to talk over, simple enough to memorize, and particular enough that after a worker's hands know the next action before the mind asks for it. If a visitor came at any hour, they might say nothing is happening. But by evening, the table will hold a neat harvest of pages with no two exactly the same, yet every one belonging to the same family. Near midday, someone opens the gate to let a taller breeze wander through. The vat surface nods, but does not wrinkle. The mucilage keeps peace. A gorged scoop of clean water eases the thickness-sweetness back toward perfect. The mallet rests. The press takes a turn. The warm room receives new arrivals. Tools hum within their places. When the meal bell from a neighbor's yard drifts in, the papermakers pause as they did yesterday. Rice, pickles, broth, and tea. Palm edges are flexed. The brush hand is folded gently and opened again. There is no speech about craft. The craft is sitting between them, on the boards and in the vat, waiting with no impatience at all. Afternoon settles into a calm that suits finishing work. The vat keeps its quiet eddy, but the room beside it takes the day's harvest and teaches it how to behave in the world, how to receive ink, how to lie flat, how to travel without bruising. This is the hour for sizing, for folds that remember their crease, and for cords that hold a stack like a careful hand. At the stove, a pot of thin starch warms until it answers the spoon with a slow, even coat. The liquid should not string, it should glide. A brush with square-cut hair waits in a porcelain cup. Sheets meant for writing are laid one by one upon a clean board. The brush crosses each page in long lanes from head to foot, then again with the same stroke, never back and forth. The motion is smooth and quiet. The page takes what it needs and gives back a soft sheen, no glare, only the promise that ink will sit where the brush leaves it. Edges are dabbed last, with the lightest touch so they do not gather a heavy rim. Sized leaves rest on slats where air moves without haste. The room holds its temper warm enough to dry, cool enough to keep fibers calm. You can hear almost nothing here. Only the faint slide of a sheet being lifted to the rack and the bristles whisper when a corner is persuaded to lie down. When the surface has lost its wet shine and feels cool rather than damp, the paper is ready for a little polish. A smooth stone, wrapped once in cloth, travels across the face in steady arcs. The change is not dramatic, it is a quiet settling. The hand that will write later will feel it at once. Near a window, another table holds the folding frame. A stack of sheets is tapped to square, then folded along a guide. A bone folder runs the crease with a single pass, leaving a line the page will remember without cracking. Pairs become quires. Quires become a little block. The papermaker knocks the spine edge against the table so the folds align like reeds along a bank. Holes are placed with a slender all 4, sometimes 5, depending on the binding the customer prefers. A skein of thread sits ready, hemp for strong use, silk for work that asks to be shown. The needle travels in and out with a path learned from elders, corner looped, spine gathered, knots tucked where fingers will not feel them. This binding is simple and steady. It allows pages to open lying flat, it forgives hands that return often, and it can be mended when years have done their honest work. Covers are cut from thicker board or layered paper pressed under weight until it behaves like thin wood. The surface is brushed clean, edges are given a slight round so sleeves will not catch them. A title slip narrow pale receives 3 characters in a practice hand. The ink is spare and sure. The slip is pasted to the upper right, pressed under a smooth stick, and left to settle. When the little book is held up to the light, it carries the lattice's faint ghost within, a reminder of the bamboo that taught it to be strong. Not every sheet is meant for books. Some become wrappers for ceramic bowls traveling to market. The papermaker takes the second's pages with a soft speck or a wave and cuts them into generous squares. Each square is stroked with a little oil at the center, then cradled around a bowl so the lip is cushioned. Twine ties are snug, not tight. A bundle of 4 sits patiently until more bowls come. Wrapped goods survive corners, and carts with less complaint. Paper becomes a shield that weighs almost nothing. At a long bench, window skins are fitted to waiting frames. The oiled leaf is set across the ribs and coaxed outward from the center with the flat of the palm. A light string laces the edges in a simple pattern. The frame stands against the wall until the paper learns its stretch. When the frame is tapped with a fingernail, it answers with a low, content note. Later, in someone's house, this surface will drink sunlight and return it as calm. The press sees one more duty before dusk. A small stack of sized leaves, placed between boards with thin slips of paper at intervals, goes under the screw. The weight settles for a short while, just long enough to smooth any shy swell after the brush. When lifted, the sheets pair easily and rest flat. A brush dot on a slip marks this bundle as sized and pressed so no one later mistakes it for the untreated pile. Across the shop, a worker cares for the tools that will make tomorrow's work ordinary and kind. The bamboo screen is brushed once more with a soft broom, tilting the light to see if any glint betrays a strand lodged in the weave. A tiny silk tie holds down a raised splinter until a full repair day arrives. Couching boards are wiped while they are still a little warm, because warmth releases any thin film that might have formed. The mole's wooden frame gets a fingertip of oil at the corners where water lingers. This is less Polish than Bonn. Bundling begins when the air turns gold. Finished sheets, those chosen for writing, are counted in lifts that the hand knows without looking. Every 10, a thin slip; every 50, a tighter cord. The cord is drawn firm and knotted in a flat tie that lies without bulk. Edges neat in a true square. A wrapper of tougher paper or cloth goes around the block, and a brush writes a simple note: the shop mark, the size, the lot, a word about finish. The letters are for the next pair of hands who will care for these leaves. Stacks meant to travel are prepared as though they were people setting out. Corners receive card guards so a bump will not bruise them. A lattice grate waits by the gate, its slats lined with soft paper so the bundle's faces do not learn the pattern of wood. A cover is tied with straw rope that gives a little and does not cut. When the cart arrives in the morning, loading will be quiet and quick. The road shakes less when a package cannot rattle. A small cultural aside, placed gently, sheets from yards like this fed many calm labors. Scribes copied scriptures with brushes that seemed to breathe on such paper. Shopkeepers kept ledgers whose edges darkened with the touch of clean hands. Children learned their first characters on pages that forgave a pause and a second stroke. Even kites that rose on festival days lifted frames dressed in these thin skins, turning wind into play. As evening leans further, the shop takes stock without ceremony. The vat is skinned, the last cloud of fiber is saved under water against tomorrow. The mucilage bucket is rinsed and refilled to a friendly thinness. The mallets lie with faces up so the wood can dry evenly. The press is left open a little, screw-eased, bed brushed. The warm room's brazier is turned to a breath. Doors sit on their latches, but do not slam. Windows of oiled paper hold a soft color that suggests a lamp, though none is lit yet. A ledger receives 3 short lines, count of sheets, number of books sewn, bundles wrapped. No flourish, only the truth the hands are willing to stand behind. A brush is washed until clear, then shaken once, and laid across its rest so the tip does not bend. Jackets find shoulders. The gate lifts a palm's width for the evening air, and then lowers again as the last person steps out. What remains is a sense of things placed where they can wake easily. Boards face boards. Screens stand upright, bundles wait without sinking. The yard, which hummed all day, quiets to a room that seems to be listening. Tomorrow will ask for the same gestures in perhaps a slightly different order. The shop is ready to agree. Evening gathers without hurry. The yard's steam has thinned to a memory. The warm room breathes like a sleeping animal. A faint gold lies on the boards where sheets cooled an hour ago. It is the time for bundles to leave the table and learn the road. The crate is brought from its corner light, latticed, lined with soft paper so wood will not mark a face. Finished stacks slide in spine first, each lift counted by touch, every 10 with a slip, every 50 tied gently. Corners receive small guards cut from thicker offcuts. A cover of oiled cloth is drawn over the crate and fastened with straw rope that holds firmly but forgives a bump. Labels are brushed simply. Shop mark, sheet size, the day's lot, a plain word for finish. Ink dries as the rope is knotted. The crate waits in the cool near the gate. Not all bundles ride together. A shoulder pole carries 2 smaller packs into the lane, one for the binder 2 streets away, one for a stationer who keeps pencils in jars and brushes in their sleeves. The apprentice who goes has learned to walk as the crate prefers, knees soft, steps neat, weight kept quiet. Where stone meets earth, He shortens pace so the load will not learn to sway. He does not need the list. He knows the route by the smell of each doorway. At the bookbinder's, the exchange is gentle. The old man's thumb travels the edges, searching for slips or soft places. He lifts a sheet to the window and reads the faint lattice within. It pleases him. He does not praise. He says only, "This will accept a patient brush." The apprentice smiles without showing teeth, accepts a coil of thread for the shop's bindings, and sets the bundle in the corner where tomorrow's spines will line up like reeds. At the stationer's, the packets find their labels without asking. One goes to writing practice, one to account books, one to envelopes for a clerk who likes a seal to hold. The owner counts not by numbers, but by the way a stack sits in the hand, weight true, breath even. He offers a small packet of lamblack as payment for last month's paper for window skins. The shop will grind it with oil for a repair to a finished page if a spot must be coaxed away. Back in the yard, the window frames that were strung at noon are lifted and tapped. They answer with a soft note. Two are carried to a neighbor whose kitchen opened to the street all winter. The new paper settles on the ribs, is laced, and tested with the palm. When it is picked up and turned to the light, the room changes. Edges soften. The table loses its glare. The neighbor touches the surface with the back of her fingers and nods. Payment is a jar of pickled greens and a promise of a winter's radish when the pit is opened. Accounts written in favors hold best in small streets. Uses fan outward from the gate. A potter takes a sheaf of seconds to nest bowls in straw. A fan maker leaves a ribbed skeleton wrapped in cloth with a note about the arc he prefers. The sheet will be cut along that curve tomorrow so the ribs will breathe together. A teacher stops for a thin stack of practice leaves. She will write the first character at the top of each page before class so her students can follow the stroke as breath follows breath. Paper carries people like threads carry cloth seen only when held up to the light. When the apprentice returns, the shoulder pole leans against the wall where it always leans. The rope is coiled loosely, not tight, so it will not remember a twist. The crate by the gate is slid onto a small cart and braced with wooden wedges. The carter will arrive at first light and take it as far as the bridge, where a larger wagon waits. A brush script on the crate's cover says which side should face the horse. Small notices like this keep corners square through turns. Inside, the day folds itself away. The vat is skinned, the remaining cloud is caught in cloth and set under water to keep sweet. The mucilage pail is rinsed and refilled to a thin, friendly glide. Mallets lie face up so wood will dry without warping. The press screw is eased again and touched with a drop of oil where the collar meets the post. Screens stand not lean, so the bamboo will not forget its shape. Couching boards are wiped while they still carry a whisper of warmth. Wipes done worn demand less work tomorrow. A straw broom gathers the day's fine grit, the fibers that wandered, the sliver that fell from a corner, a grain of sand carried on a shoe. The sweep follows the grain of the planks. Little ridges are not left for toes to learn. Rinse water saved in a jar serves a final errand. Brushes receive it, hands receive it, and the floor takes the rest along a groove cut long ago to a small drain. Someone lights the kettle. Tea comes in small cups that warm the fingers. No speech is necessary, and none is avoided. If there is talk, it is about whether that the paper will remember rain that asked for slower drying, a wind that a window skin will enjoy. A scrap of two moves through the room like a moth, and then rests. Work sits around them, not asking for anything. What does satisfaction look like here? Not applause, not accounts shouted to the street. It shows as corners that meet without argument, stacks that lie calm under a hand, tools set in their places as if the day had made a gentle promise to itself. Pride is the quiet knowledge that tomorrow will start with nothing crooked. The shop's success is measured in how quickly the morning can begin. Lamps are trimmed short, oiled paper windows hold a soft, even glow that makes the walls retreat and the room more generous. The latch clicks without harshness. Outside, the lane smells like earth cooling, charcoal ending its speech, and soup that will be eaten soon. The yard listens to its own silence and finds it well-shaped. The last gesture is small. A sheet with the day's first dip, saved aside for this purpose, is pinned on the wall near the gate. It carries a thumbprint in the corner from a wet hand, a faint brush mark where a size test touched down, and a soft wave along one edge that no one will sell. It stays as a reminder of the day's pace, ordinary, steady, made of gestures that only look like nothing from far away. The gate is drawn to without squeak. The street returns to its night. From still vats and paper's soft glow, let's step into motion. Ahead is a narrow carriage lit by con lamps, walls lined with pigeonholes, canvas bags thumping softly as they trade hands in the dark. If you're ready, we'll ride the Victorian night mail, where letters learn their paths while most of the countryside sleeps. Dust folds into the platform, and the narrow carriage waits behind the locomotive like a tidy room about to travel. Its door stands open to lamplight. Inside, pigeonholes line both walls in careful ranks, labels printed in black ink, some familiar towns and some tiny halts you'd miss by day. A long sorting table runs down the middle with a lip to keep stacks from sliding. Hooks carry canvas bags with brass mouths and leather thongs. In here, night has a steady job. Clerks arrive in quiet order. Coats off, sleeves roll, soft caps tugged low. Each lifts his own date stab from a satchel, checks the rubber, and tests it on a scrap. One neat circle, day and hour clear. A tin of ink opens with a small pop. The pad drinks a little. Stamps touch down and lift again, firm, not hurried. It is a sound this carriage knows, like rain on a shallow roof. A kettle sits on a spirit stove by the guard's cupboard. It murmurs while pigeonholes are made ready, facing slips tucked into their lips, string laid in small skeins by the corner, a pencil sharpened to a modest point. The senior clerk walks the aisle once, eyes moving without fuss, counting bags in their places, locks paired with keys on a chain at his belt. He touches the catcher, arm folded flat against the carriage wall, then the net on the far side, its frame bolted true. These will reach out to trade bags with the line without the train stopping. But there is no drama in the gesture. It is all measured metal and practiced timing. A porter passes a sealed pouch across the threshold, registered letters, brass-sewn bag mouth, numbered seal already pressed. The senior clerk signs with a pencil stub and places the pouch in the iron locker by the guard seat. The key turns without scrape. No one looks at it again unless they must. Not every letter is alike. Some are simply folded words. Some carry value that needs a lock between stations. The carriage shivers when the buffers tighten. A whistle reaches through the door like a reminder. The kettle is poured into thick cups to fingers of tea, not more, and set in a tray with rails so they cannot wander. The door is drawn in, the lamp wicks are trimmed, and the floor takes the first smooth pull of motion. Outside, hedges level into a dark ribbon. Inside, work begins. Sacks are opened at an even pace. Canvas mouths gape, are turned inside out by practice hands, and shed a drift of envelopes onto the table, cream, gray-brown, some with wax that has learned to hold, some with nothing but string. The junior clerk faces the letters, turning each so stamps look up and to the right, making a neat stack, all reading the same way. It is a small kindness to later hands. The stamper follows with a soft rhythm, click, turn, click, marking place, and or so tomorrow's route can be proven if asked. Bundles grow and find their homes. Letters to the near stops are tied with two turns of string and a square knot that lies flat. A facing slip card with a town name and a confident hand sits on top under the tie. Farther destinations go to deeper pigeonholes. An old habit sorts by river and line as much as by county. Roots live in clerks' heads like maps the tongue doesn't need to say. Now and then a letter hesitates, name known, place unclear, and the senior hand comes, glances, and flicks it to a hole that will carry it closer. Send it to the next mind that knows, the work seems to say. The sway of the carriage is part of the job. Shoes find the floor's center without looking. Stacks sit in the lee of the table's lip. A clerk writes 3 neat letters on a facing slip while the carriage leans gently through a curve. The pencil stays inside its line because the wrist moves with the floor, not against it. Lamps hum as little flames, trimmed square so they do not smoke. Shades are adjusted to keep light on the work and off the eyes. At a line-side crane, the first exchange waits, bag hung from its arm with strap set just so. The train has no intention of stopping. The catcher arm is swung out on its hinge. Its jaw will receive the canvas loop as the carriage passes. On the other side, the net is ready to throw out a made-up bag from its hook, a throw timed so the bag meets the post's arm instead of the ditch. The junior clerk stands by, a bag in both hands, watching the white peg that marks the pickup point. There is no countdown allowed. The line knows when. The carriage draws even with the post, a clap as the catcher takes the loop, a hollow thump as the net gives up its bag. The train does not notice. The clerks barely do. The junior grins anyway, then returns to his place as if he had only turned a page. Bundles leave the table with the quiet pride of being complete. String ends are trimmed with a small knife whose blade sees just enough friction to stay honest. Facing slips tilt in their ties like flag tabs. The senior clerk checks by touch more than by sight, a thumb under the string to feel if it lies truly flat, a hand's weight on a bag to guess if it wants 1 letter more or less before the knot. He is not counting numbers. He is balancing loads and habits. Someone refills cups. Someone wipes a small spill with the back of a sleeve and then with a rag. A tin of boiled sweets passes once down the aisle in case a throat wants settling. The window vents are cracked the width of a coin to let steam and breath go somewhere. Air learns to cross the room rather than collect in a corner. A note offered gently to modernize, sorting at speed might look perilous. But this carriage treats motion as furniture. Many clerks are former counter hands who learned the map first and the sway second. Their skill is not defiance, it is accommodation. The job is to keep letters moving as the world moves, to give the morning its post without asking daylight for help. Between exchanges, The stamps settle into a slow rhythm. The junior clerk sorts postcards with careful fingers so brittle corners do not catch on the table edge. Another clerk checks a small roster of forwarding addresses kept rubber-banded in his pocket, tiny rectangles that turn confusion into a next step. A parcel label is rewritten in a clearer hand. A bundle is untied and retied because the slip was upside down. No one is scolded. The work corrects itself by being done again, almost the way a tune is hummed once more until it remembers. At a small stop, the carriage door slides and a postman leans in with a pouch. He does not step across the threshold. The floor here belongs to the staff on the move. The exchange is quick and quiet. Pouch and bag out a nod. They thank you. The door eased shut with 2 fingers, and no bang. The train leaves behind a platform with 2 lamps and 1 cat, and gathers its ribbon of dark again. By midnight, the pigeonholes look different. Some stand hollow, some crowd with tied lifts ready for the next throw. The table is wiped with a damp rag that smells faintly of ink and soap. The date stamp circle grows a shade lighter as the pad dries. Someone adds a drop from the tin and presses 3 times on scrap to settle it. The countryside slides by as a soft absence. Hedges, fields, a drifting light, and a farmhouse window that keeps its own hours. A broad black where a canal runs near. The carriage holds a small, particular world hands, labels string flame, and the private sound of paper agreeing to be arranged. The kettle sighs again. Cups are topped. A clerk stretches his back, palms flat on the table edge, and steps back to his slot. The senior touches the catcher arm with the back of his knuckles to feel if night air has made the hinge think of stiffness. It has not. He smiles at no one, checks the next-facing slips with a glance, and the table takes another bag's worth of addresses, as if they were seeds being set in even furrows. Midnight deepens, but the carriage grows clearer to itself. Work has found its pace, and with pace comes a manners book that needs no print. Every tool has a home at arm's length. Every gesture is the smallest version that still does the job. The table's lip keeps bundles. Honest, the pigeonhole's closest towns near the door. Far lines higher up teach the hands without speaking. The next line side crane appears in the window as a pale post with a white arm that holds an incoming bag. The senior clerk stands by the catcher, not to manage drama but to confirm quiet, hinged, jaw square, latch seated. The arm swings up to its detent with a soft click. Across the aisle, the throwing net unfurls like a folded wing and fixes against its stop. The junior clerk rests the made-up bag on his thigh, fingers spread under the brass mouth, string tied in a square knot that can be found and freed into pulls. He watches the post's marker peg rather than the post. The peg tells truth about distance. The exchange is a 2-note chord. A clap on the catcher side when the loop is taken, a thump on the net when the bag leaves. The train does not change breath. The carriage barely changes tone. The junior checks the hook's carter pin as habit rather than doubt, flips it home, and returns to the table. The incoming bag rolls onto the bench with a familiar weight. Canvas stuffed, leather mouth cool under the hand. Both bags have gone where they were meant to go. That simple correctness is the work's purest satisfaction. Fresh letters slide out, and facing begins again. Stamps up and right. Address lines straighten with a thumb. When a corner curls, the clerk touches it once and lets it lie rather than fighting it flat. Smudged postmarks receive a second, clearer strike nearby, never on top, clarity matters more than neatness. Postcards thin, proud of their small pictures, are handled by their edges so the varnish won't learn fingerprints. Some misses hesitate. A town with a name shared by 2 counties. A cottage without a lane only near the mill. A letter to a soldier with a regiment named but no barracks. These do not stall the table. They go to a marked slot, forward and find, where another clerk keeps a pocket bundle of reference slips, changes of station, renamed stops, new routes since last winter. He consults the little stack like a man asking the time, finds Mill Lane, now Canal Street for Western District, adds a pencil note on the facing slip, and sends the bundle to the next best path. The carriage believes in second chances arranged quickly. Registered items wait in their iron locker. Between exchanges, 2 clerks open it together. A bag emerges, brass collar numbered, string seal unbroken. The senior reads the number aloud. The junior repeats it and notes it on a slate. The bag opens on the table with 2 careful hands, contents counted without haste. Each letter is checked against its list and moved to a second registered pouch bound for the correct junction. The lock turns again, smooth and sure. A key that bites is oiled at once. A lock that argues is replaced. Value in transit deserves quiet hinges. Postmarks are small promises. The stamper keeps his pad alive with a drop of ink when the circle fails. He tests on a scrap-clear day, readable RN, then returns to the stream. The circle lands near the stamp without touching it, never across a face, never through a name. Handwriting is treated as a person would be. If a line runs too low to accept a clear strike, the clerk finds another clear corner rather than forcing a blur. Knots tell their own story. Square knots for bundles. A clove hitch when a string must stay ready to be pulled and reused. The string is never tied so tight it bruises the stack. Tension enough to carry, slack enough to breathe. When a knot is cut, it is cut clean, not worried with fingers until it frays. Fray becomes lint, lint becomes smudge. The carriage dislikes smudge. Etiquette flows along the aisle. No one walks behind the stamper when his hand rises and falls. A bump steals clarity. When the train leans through a fast bend, the man at the far pigeonholes anchors his foot in the floor's shallow scuff where generations of shoes have trusted a hold. Cups are lifted by the base rather than the rim, so damp fingers won't touch paper. A cough is met with a boiled sweet, offered once, and refused if not wanted. The tin returned to its shelf with the label facing outward because that habit helps when the lamps burn low. At a small rural platform, there is a human exchange that belongs to the railway's polite grammar. The door slides. A local postman steps to the threshold without entering. He passes a pouch inward, takes one outward, and tips his cap. The junior clerk returns the gesture with 2 fingers, then settles the new bag onto the table. The door closes with a rub of the palm to guide it, not a shove. The night deserves quiet even from wood and brass. An aside offered softly. This moving room kept out hours, but ordinary virtues, predictability, economy of motion, respect for tools, in an era before automated sorting. The map lived under caps and behind eyes. A clerk could draw the county's lines with string on a tabletop and tell where a letter might find a cart by dawn. That knowledge did not brag, it simply behaved. Between cranes, there are small repairs and small pauses. A lamp wick is trimmed square and reset. The catcher's hinge sees a drop of oil laid with a matchstick. A string skein is rewound loosely so it will unroll without snarl. A pencil is touched to a knife stone twice, and no more. The table's damp cloth is folded to a clean face so a fingertip won't carry yesterday into today. The kettle murmurs again. Tea finds cups without encroaching on bundles. The senior clerk takes one slow sip standing, sets the cup in its tray, and checks the next pickup's time against the clock in his pocket. He does not tap the glass. Tapping teaches a clock to lie. He wins the stem a quarter turn and returns the watch to its home. Soon the long line of pigeonholes looks like a tide chart, some near slack, some filling. The nearer towns have taken their share, the farther lines are waiting for the next junction. Bags already tied for down the line throws rest with their mouths turned toward the net so they can be found by feel on the moment. A facing slip with bold ink sits under each tie, tails tucked so they cannot snag and tear. A made-up bag feels right in the arms before it ever meets the hook. Weight even, sides flat, string lying like a calm river across the top. The carriage meets another crane. Again the arm goes out. Again the net accepts. Clap, thump. The junior clerk's shoulder follows the train's lean. His feet remain quiet. He sets the incoming bag near the registered locker, turns it so the brass rim faces left where his knife prefers to work, and opens it with a pull that does not nick the canvas. The bag will live many lives. It deserves respect as well as speed. Outside, the countryside is a wide, variable absence. A smear of low trees, a flash from a pond, a steady dark where fields hide their rows. Inside, the letters sound like light rain when they fall from a turned bag, like cards when a bundle is riffled, like a metronome when the stamper keeps his small promise. The moving room continues its soft arithmetic, many names into fewer sacks into one line into morning. Near the carriage end, the guard notes the next junction on a chalkboard no larger than a dinner plate. The words are clear enough to see in lamplight and simple enough to erase with a sleeve. The board is not for the clerks. They carry the root in their bones. It is for the quick human need to look up and be reminded. Comfort is sometimes a word on a board. A last small etiquette before the next pickup. The clerk at the throw stand murmurs ready without looking away from the peg. No one answers aloud. They simply are. The bag leaves one world and joins another. The train does not slow. Night does not object. Table receives the next small storm of paper and continues to make weather out of addresses. The line begins to gather companions. A siding ghosts past with wagons dozing. A signal shows its white face. Lamps multiply along the verge until the windows hold more reflections than night. The carriage notes these changes as a hand would note the weight of a cup without thought. Only through use, inside, the rhythm tightens. Junction ahead. Pigeonholes shift from village names to wider mouths. Up main, down branch, cross-country, coastline labels that live in clerks' heads as roots rather than words. Bundles already tied for the next line are drawn forward. Facing slips with bolder ink sit under their ties so another office can read them at a glance. The junior clerk lays out empty sacks by the net, mouths open, ready to earn their brass collars. An incoming bag hits the table with the usual little thud and adds its small weather of paper to the surface. Faces are lifted, stamps turned upright, postmarks pressed home. Then a hesitation, a handful of letters that do not belong to this stream, a market town that feeds another junction. a terrace with a number that points to a different district, a slip addressed to a street whose name changed with the last municipal zeo. The carriage does not stop to regret them. A shallow basket sits on the corner, marked in a blunt hand, to correct. The miss sorts land there without scolding. Between dips to the catcher and neat throws to the net, a clerk with a neat pencil and a quiet memory takes that basket. He consults a pocketbook held together with string, new ward boundaries, streets renamed, sub-offices opened and closed since winter. He adds a line to a facing slip, now via North Road. Send on to West Loop, try at Canal Street, tiny edits that teach a letter to find its lock. The corrected bundle is tied again, slip tucked, string ends cut short, and sent to a pigeonhole that feeds the right sack. The motion is fast, but it is never hurried. The train leans, then straightens. The signal lamps line themselves in a gentle ladder that drops toward the throat of the station. The senior clerk closes the catcher arm with a sure swing, the jaw clicks into its cradle. Across the aisle, the net folds home, and tapes are tittied. A last bundle is tied, weight checked by palm, and the mouth of the outgoing sack is drawn shut with 2 clean turns. The guard at the carriage taps twice on the partition. It is not a warning, only a reminder. Stillness soon. The platform slides under the door with a wide, even light. The train sighs to a pause. For a few breaths the carriage is a room that has stopped pretending to be a corridor. Air changes coal, lamp oil, gant stone. Porters step into the square of light and wait for the nod. They do not climb in. The floor belongs to the night staff. Bags move in a small choreography, out to handcarts marked for lines that will leave before dawn, in from a pile that has learned this carriage's habits. Registered pouches are exchanged in pairs, numbers read aloud once, and echoed once, chalk marks rubbed from the little slate, and written again. Cups find the kettle. Water hurries itself to a boil because it has been warm all along. To fingers of tea steady hands without waking the mind past the work. A bottle for the spirit stove is checked and set back. Lamp wicks are squared with tiny scissors, so the light stays even. A damp rag passes over the table in one long sweep. The grain of wood shows clean again under the film of dust that platforms like to give. For a minute, the carriage is only breath and paper no sway. No correction in the knees. The stamper takes the chance to lift the rubber, clean the face with a slice of old sheet, and press a test on scrap circle crisp, date true. The pocket watch comes out, is wound a modest quarter turn, and replaced. No one taps it. Tapping makes a clock cross. A boy from the station brings a tin with boiled sweets and a slate pencil. He sets them by the guard seat in exchange for a half bundle of seconds the shop has kept for him since last week. His sister will practice letters on them. He thanks with a nod that says he knows how rooms work where things move. He is gone before the whistle remembers its voice. The brief quiet lets other courtesies rise. A clerk rubs the catcher's hinge with a matchstick dipped in oil, then wipes away what the hinge did not want. Another smooths a fray on a sack mouth with scissors that cut clean rather than chew. The net's cords are felt, not seen, each knot persuaded to lie flat again. The iron locker's key turns with a round sound, and is tested once more. These are endearing tasks necessary, almost tender done at their best in the moments when the floor forgets to travel. A gentle aside about scale, A station like this is the night's market for letters. Lines arrive from places that stayed awake in a different order. Bags trade like produce at dawn, no bargaining, only weight and destination, and the calm certainty that a tomato will still be a tomato 3 stalls down. The clerks are the stall holders who know which cart wants which crate and when. Their wisdom is not spectacular. It consists of not making others wait. The guard's chalkboard receives a new line next junction, next throws. The letters are thick and easy to read from the corner of an eye. It is not instruction so much as reassurance. Wherever you are in the work, the room shares a map with you. A porter wheels off a handcart with cross-country painted in white. Another returns with coast bags that smell faintly of salt and tar. The senior clerk counts them without counting, one by weight, one by feel of canvas, one by the habit of seeing 3 when there are 3. A bell taps somewhere far along the platform. Not for this carriage exactly, for the great animal the whole train is. The cups are drained or set safely to the rail. The net half unfurls, the catcher frees its jaw. The door is drawn in with the palm so wood will not bruise, and the latch is seated with a kindness that shows years of doing the same thing for the same reasons. Motion returns with a low, satisfying pull. The platform slips away, the station's lamps stack themselves into a bright string and then unthread into night. The carriage takes back its lean, and the table remembers the angle of a curve. The clerk's knees remember too. Bags whisper against wood. The stamper finds a clean corner. The junior's hands learn the weight of the new stream. Missorts appear again, as they always do. The shallow basket waits. A tiny book with slips reminds the hand where to send a letter that thinks 2 names are one place. A facing slip gets a neat note. String lies flat across a bundle that was retied for the right line. A small error leaves the carriage quieter than when it came. This is how a moving office apologizes. Outside is hedgerow that has put its gloss away for the night, and fields that keep their rows to themselves. Inside is flame paper twine, and the knowledge that a name looking out from an envelope will see morning because enough hands agreed about routes while most of the world slept. The next crane will appear before the tea cools. Until then, the carriage hums its narrow song, clap, thump, click, scratch, and the soft breath of sacks fill just enough. Hands move. Lamps hold. Night accepts the exchange. After the big station, the night thins. Lamps along the line grow farther apart, hedges regain their shape. The carriage returns to the soft solitude that suits it best. Inside, the work narrows toward completion. Pigeonholes that were busy an hour ago open like empty mouths, others swell with tide lifts waiting for their last exchange. The senior clerk glances once along the ranks and can tell, as a shepherd knows his flock, which bundles have a train to meet and which will ride with them to the end. The etiquette of the small hours is economy. Movements shorten. Voices lower without being told. A clerk uncoils just enough string for 3 ties, and no more. The stamper presses clear circles without leaning. His wrist does it for him now. The junior folds facing slips with a crease down the center so they stay where they are laid. None of this is new. It is simply cleaner at 2 in the morning than at 10 in the evening. 2 more cranes wait before dawn. The catcher's jaw is felt, not examined, the hinge given a breath of oil with a matchstick to keep it honest. The throwing net is checked by palm cords lying flat like well-combed hair. At the window, a pale post rises, the peg shows, and the room performs its compact again. Clap, thump, and the table fills. The incoming bag's collar is cool, the outgoing bag's weight reads correct in the arms. Nothing celebrates. The carriage prefers proof to applause. Missorts are fewer now, but the shallow basket still finds work. A terrace with a number that never belongs to that lane. A bundle addressed to a county that changed last year's border. The clerk with the pocketbook makes his small corrections, now via North Loop, send to new sub-office, and the letters learn their corrected paths without ceremony. A tiny rubber stamp that reads redirected is pressed neatly at the corner. The word is not a scold, it is a promise to try again. Registered work happens once more, with the same two voices and the same paired hands. Numbers are read, echoed, and chalked. Seals are checked for their clean impression. A bag that answered their table at midnight answers a different line now, and its mouth is tied shut with a square knot placed where the next clerk will find it. The iron locker closes with a round sound that pleases the ear. Keys settle back against the senior's belt chain and forget to show their weight. Between throws, the carriage tiddies itself while still in motion. The table's damp rag turns to a clean side and makes a single pass. Offcuts of string are gathered into a little ball that will be used again rather than shed into lint. Pencils are touched twice to the stone and put point up in a mug so they will not grow blunt unnoticed. The stamper wipes his day on a scrap and tests it on another. Black circles bloom and fade. The habit of small corrections keeps larger ones away. Preparation for arrival begins long before arrival. Bags for the final platform are brought forward and arranged by the order they will leave nearest districts first, then farther runs, then the bags that will be met by carts bound for rural roads. The senior clerk chalks a neat line on the board above the guard stool. Terminus downside bays 3 and 4. Below that, the short ladder of times. The letters are thick enough to see by lamplight, and plain enough for a glance. The board is less instruction than comfort. It lets eyes rest and still be sure. Facing slips grow larger and bolder for the last stage. A clerk writes City Northeast in a hand that a porter can read at a trot. For suburban bundles, the slips carry the station name, and a brief arrow east road gives so the bag will drift to the correct pile without argument. The string on these last bundles lies flat and kind. A knot that fights at a platform steals seconds the morning would rather use elsewhere. The catcher arm is folded and latched after the final pickup post. The net is furled and strapped back to its hooks. A cloth passes over both as if to tell them, rest a moment. The train's speed eases by a breath. Lamps along the line are thicker now, and the dark between them shorter. The carriage looks like a room again rather than a corridor still moving, but preparing to meet hands that have not been aboard. There is time for one more kettle. Tea pours into cups with rails. A boil sweet steadies a cough. The junior tips the last of the ink from the little tin into the pad and closes the lid so nothing spills when the buffers kiss the platform. The stamper presses one more clear circle on a scrap and cleans his die. The pad will sleep in a box with a folded cloth so the face does not harden. A small repair finds its moment. The edge of a canvas bag's mouth shows a fray that could widen if invited. The scissors take it clean, and a narrow binding of tape kept for such things wraps the rin, and is stitched with 3 quick passes of a heavy needle. The bag's mouth answers by lying flat again. A 2 amended at 2 will not sulk at 7. Outside, the horizon turns from black to a thin slate that hints at blue. Fields press against their hedges with less secrecy. Smoke from a farm wakes early and drifts flat along the ground. In the carriage, lamps are trimmed lower, shade hoods are nudged so the last work sits in a softer light. Dawn belongs to people who will receive letters. The carriage tries not to outshine it. The guard's chalkboard takes a last line. Arrival platform 6. The senior clerk pockets his watch and leaves it there. Time now is measured by buffers and porter's boots. Bags for near districts are set by the door with their facing slips outward. Registered pouches are placed on the iron locker ready to transfer hand to hand. The shallow basket for missorts is empty. The pigeonholes, once loud with names, look like a row of open windows. The train coasts into the yard, points sing under the wheels. The final bend shows the long roof of the terminus, glazed and faintly lit by the day that has not quite announced itself. The carriage feels the buffers ahead of seeing them. The floor goes even, the door slides. Platform breath coal, wet stone, the clean of early air moves in. Porters appear as if written on a slip. They do not step in. The threshold is observed like a rule of grammar. Bags move out in the sequence chalked above the guard's stool. Hands know where to put them because the slips make it easier to be correct than to be wrong. Carts take weight without rattle. A registered pouch crosses with 2 names said aloud and replied to aloud. The iron locker closes and is done for the night. Letters that will be walked to doors before breakfast begin their last journey while the carriage finishes its own. The junior wipes the table, finds a curling corner and presses it flat, and folds the damp rag to dry along the rail. The stamper places his die in its box and ties the lid with a single round turn that will not argue at midnight tomorrow. The string skein is wrapped around itself and set in the cupboard. The net is furled and tied. The catcher's joy is felt once more only because habit says to and then ignored. A short, shared glance passes along the aisle, not a salute, just an agreement that the room now holds nothing that must be remembered before sleep. Cups are stacked. The spirit stove is capped. A tiny pan of sand receives a spent match. The chalkboard is wiped with a sleeve. The carriage looks like itself before work begins orderly, expectant, empty in a way that means ready. Outside, dawn is more certain. Footsteps take letters down a flight of stairs and up another. Doors will open to them soon. Inside, the men put on coats that smell faintly of lamp, and string and pick up satchels that have learned their shoulder. The senior checks the last latch with 2 fingers and steps down. The carriage keeps its heat for a minute longer and then lets it go. Arrival does not feel like stopping so much as settling. The platform holds a roomy light. Breath shows pale in the morning air. Porters wheel handcarts in clean lines. The carriage answers with its last neat gestures. Outgoing sacks stand in the order they will leave a hand: city north, city south, suburban east, rural vans. Facing slips look outward so they can be read at a glance. Nothing is beautiful. Everything is clear. Registered pouches cross the threshold with paired voices. The number is said once and again. A pencil writes it on a small slate that lives on a hook. The lock goes soft in the hand. The pouch finds the guard's satchel without any scrape. The iron locker closes and is satisfied. For the night, bags move to barrows. Barrows turn toward bays. A porter rests a palm on the mouth of a sack to feel the knot and check that string lies flat. Another glances at a slip and swings left instead of right. Choices are small and correct. The station's roof gathers echoes and thins them until they are only a low, agreeable sound. Inside, clerks undo the room they made while the countryside slept. The catcher arm is folded gently home and last. The net is furled against its stops, cords laid smooth with a hand. The pigeonholes, so recently busy, look like a tidy row of open shelves. Each receives a single dusting swipe from a damp cloth. The table is wiped in one long pass. A last loop of string that tried to hide is found and coiled. The stamper cleans his die with a corner of old paper, presses one clear circle on scrap, and nestles the rubber face down on a cloth in its tin. The ink pad is closed so the surface can rest. Pencils stand point up in a mop. Scissors return to the small drawer that has learned their shape. The kettle's spirit flame is capped. Cups drain to a narrow tray with rails. There is a short ledger for the traveling office. It does not tell stories. It keeps counts, bags received, bags dispatched, registered pouches by number. One note about the small tape binding tied on a frayed mouth. The senior clerk writes in a measured hand. The lines are simple and sufficient. He blows the page dry and leaves the book open just long enough for the ink to forget its shine. A pair of seconds clean sheets with faint marks are left on the table for the day shift to use as scrap. A chalk line on the board above the guard's stool says "Kit sound, he enjoyed, net good." It is the smallest update, but it eases the next hands. In rooms like this, courtesy is often a future made easier. They put the carriage's own house back to rights. Latches are checked with 2 fingers, never slammed. The floor is swept toward the door, not away from it. The damp rag is hung over the rail so it will dry straight and not sour. A tiny pan of sand receives a trimmed wick, a thread of lint, a match that has given its life. The guard's stool is pushed in. The locker's key returns to the chain. Coats find shoulders. Caps settle. A tin of boiled sweets slips back into the cupboard, label forward. A porter calls up from the platform to ask if anything else wants a hand. The senior clerk answers that all is well. His voice is low the way it has been all night. He lifts the latch with the inside of his fingers so the wood will not bruise and steps down. The platform carries coal and a little bakery warmth. Letters begin to scatter into small human puffs, baskets, satchels, vans. Stairs catch footsteps. Doors open to first rattles of the day. The clerks walk with the easy sway that remains for a minute after a moving floor stops. They will sleep while morning stretches. Their room will wait for night without complaint. A few last acts remain, almost private. The junior clerk loosens his wrists and rubs a spot of ink from the side of one finger with a crumb of soap. He ties the string skein with one round turn that comes free into pulls. He taps the catcher jaw once with the back of his knuckle, not to test it, only to say goodbye in the language of tools. Then he closes the door softly, and the carriage stands quiet as a cupboard. Outside, the glass roof brightens. Pigeons choose their ledge. A cart stacked with near-district bags rolls toward a flight of steps that knows their weight inside. Lamps are turned down to a memory and then to nothing. The room becomes only wood, iron, canvas, and the scent of paper that has agreed to be arranged. What remains of the night is handed to the day with no need for speech. A chalkboard wiped, a book closed, a space left clean. The next shift will make it a moving office again. The path for that is short because the people leaving have made it so. And the letters, so many quiet rectangles, will knock on doors in an hour or two as if they had simply appeared. Those doors will not know about the metal jaw that cut a loop, or the knot that lay flat, or the cup of tea braced inside a curve. They do not need to. The small work is best when it leaves few footprints. The men step into the cool and walk towards sleep. The carriage keeps its shape in the corner of the platform, resting like a tool laid down properly. Now these calm stories can keep you company as you rest. Thank you for listening, and sweet dreams.